So we're Friends of the Landscape Archive. We're about promoting archives, keeping it a living collection, making it as accessible as possible, and bringing it to the attention of new audiences. And these are some of the different journals that the Landscape Institute, the Institute of Landscape Architects, has produced over the past nearly 92 years. And this is the first one, number 1 in 1931. This was, we want to see these all digitized. We've been working on this for about 10 years. We want to promote the profession, to promote the Institute, and to promote landscape architects and their work. And the information that these journals contain is unique. These were taken from a 75th anniversary celebration board that we did in 2004. So we organised talks. This was instigated by Tom Turner, who got us going with all this. We now have 85 talks on our website, which are freely available. So please do have a look at them and make use of them. And this is the most recent launch that we've done into oral history. Thank you, Helen, for making that possible. And we had a fantastic day in September with Brian Clouston and members of his practice, and we looked at his work and life and experiences and things. And these are now available on the website as well. And we only posted them, we haven't publicised them yet properly, but we posted them last Sunday, and within 4 days they'd had 360 views, so fantastic. Our next talk, we dance around this symposium subject, and last year we did more investigations on landscapes of housing. This year we will dance around this topic of community landscapes. We haven't published information about these, but this will be launched next week in the beginning of January, so please keep an eye out for that. I think we've got some really interesting speakers there. So this is Mel's next talk, which they've asked us to promote, which is on our subject. So please look this up as well on 9th of December. I think that will be interesting. Join us. Please do join us. We need your support and your involvement and engagement and things, and we need to make the archive more widely known about. We can only do that through people. And follow us here. And we should be, I was just been advised we should be on LinkedIn as well. So there's space under here for more activities. We also need more support on our committee. So if anybody feels like they've got particular skills, please give us a shout. We have a book sale run by Bettina at the back of the room. So please do have a good scrummage through all that and find some treasures. This is our programme for today. So I'd like now to introduce our chair for today, Carolin Göhler, who is president-elect of the Landscape Institute. We've had a succession of high-profile people from the Institute chairing these events, so we're very pleased to have Carolin here today. She has been 35 years landscape architect and horticulturalist. She's currently working as a gardens and parks consultant for the National Trust and also still freelance consultant.
Welcome everybody on this slightly wet Saturday, but what a better way to actually look and learn from some fantastic speakers FOLAR has aligned to us today. Obviously, landscape for communities. is really something which I think benefits there's always an ever increasing evidence that access to landscapes, community gardens and gardening and all these things itself are good for our communities' physical and mental health, and also social well-being as much as biodiversity and overall nature. And obviously the COVID pandemic has really shown that. So and I hope our speakers in some ways get into that sort of theme in between. And increasingly we know that cities that were built and that in cities, green spaces which are constructed and maintained are often well connected, attractive landscapes, and green spaces are likely to have healthier and happier and more productive citizens with fewer demands for health services. So something really to keep in mind. And I think it came out in the Landscape Institute Awards this year, the President's Choice, where Bradford Metropolitan District Council actually has done a lot of health research and has worked out that if you give children access to green space and exercise in some respects, that they actually would have much less health problems in future life. So often community places and landscapes are not formally designed and evolve in a sort of fluid way, and bringing in sort of much more distinctive feel and flair, particularly obviously where local people are involved, and they develop also a kind of ownership of space to make it distinctive, and in time a different kind of landscape beauty. But it also allows a lot of discourse and community bonding and networking, which I think sometimes is forgotten. Often community landscapes are on publicly owned land and created as temporary or permanent sites, and one often tries to find the right locations and funding and resources like local authorities anywhere else, trying to get support and participation from communities. And managing and maintaining at the end is often quite an onerous exercise. But today we are actually in a treat for looking at diverse angles around the theme landscapes of communities, looking at different stories, heritage places, but also younger teams, management people, learning about nature, and so much more. And I think in my sort of career, I remember Camberley Street being sort of quite, interesting sort of project. And I think one of the speakers obviously will talk about things. The Culsop Trust and its work sort of all started in the mid 1980s. And obviously Groundwork UK came in doing a lot of community work. And I'm really pleased we have someone speaking around that. Then you had also learning through landscapes and eventually forest schools in the 1990s. And I think since then, the whole sort of community involvement in landscape and management has really sort of mushroomed, which is really fantastic to see. So for me, it is more sort of giving people the opportunity to be tactile with nature, understanding the value in nature of ecology, as much as encouraging different types of beauty. So let's listen to our first sort of speaker. We have today, is that correct? I hope so, yes. So Leah McNally from the London Wildlife Trust. Leah is dedicated to involving and inspiring and supporting people's access to nature. There we are. As Director of Learning, Youth and Communities at the London Wildlife Trust, she has significantly developed the Trust's learning programs, youth programs, community partnerships, and volunteering. And she's been involved in lots of different projects. They reach from redeveloping the visitor facilities at Camberley Street, I've just mentioned earlier, near King's Cross, but also sort of a long-term provider sort of for the Walthamstow wetlands. But she's also been involved in a 9 million National Trust funded project led by Waltham Forest Council, which included the restoration of listed buildings into visitor facilities and opening up Europe's largest urban wetland. And she's been also involved in the Great Northwood 6.5-year living landscape project, which worked obviously with volunteers and community groups, landowners, over many local authorities, and which revived and reimagined the Great Northwood in South London as a home for nature, people, and a modern landscape. So you're also involved in lots of strategic implementation groups around communities organizing, mobilizing, and also you sit on federations, the Federation's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion and Safeguarding Working Groups. So we definitely have someone with wide-ranging experience. So it's over to you, Leah.
I've put together a presentation to really focus on our community work and also just talk about our schools work and our youth work, as well as looking at the Great Northwood project that was just mentioned, because I think that's probably the most relevant one. Just to start with our vision, so I work for London Wildlife Trust, and our vision is a London alive with nature, where everybody can experience and enjoy wildlife and the wider environment. So for me, the word everyone is very, very important, which is why I've underlined it. So we've been making good progress with increasing our diversity and inclusion work over the last sort of 10 years or so. And really, I'm going to try and sort of show some context about why that's important, particularly for our sector, nature conservation. This is our strategic plan. It's on our website. So if anybody wants to have a look in a bit more detail, if you go to London Wildlife Trust website, you'll be able to find a bit more. This just shows our strategy on a page. So we have 3 strategic goals: inspire, influence, and transform. And the goal that I'm leading on is Inspire, goal 1, which is all about our people-focused work, how we get people involved in nature and wildlife in London. We have underneath that, feeding into that goal, one around young people specifically and engaging young people, mobilising young people to act for nature and the climate, and also one around environmental education. So I'm going to cover those 2 topics and then focus on some projects as well. So I'm just going to give you some context, and it's probably a little bit random, but these are the things that stick in my mind when we're looking at developing programs. So this might be a shocking statistic, but 1 in 7 children will not have visited a park or green space this year in London. So I can see some, but that is a true statistic, okay? The environmental sector is the second least diverse after agriculture. Probably not a surprise to hear that one. And that's on the Race Report 2022. We know that there's a drop-off after primary school with engagement with nature. So this is all kind of defining our work, really. We know also that unpaid volunteering is the traditional route into nature conservation, into the sector, which is a huge barrier for a lot of people. And we also know, picking up on your point about health and well-being, that there's been a 30% increase on children and adolescent mental health services, and a 30% increase in complexity as well. And there's a very high percentage of young people in London. So 25% of the population of London is people aged 15 to 29. And even higher, again, for Black, Asian, minoritized ethnic communities as well. So these are the things that are going around in my head when coming up with new programs and projects, and how we can kind of try to address some of these statistics. I'm going to first talk about our outdoor learning program. So this is essentially age 0 to 11. So we've been delivering outdoor education since the 1980s, when we began. We focus on nursery age group and primary school for our learning programs. And we're one of the largest education providers in London. So we reach 10,000 children a year. We'd love to do more, but capacity and sites hold us back, I would say. We have a family learning program as well for children and their parents, and we're reaching around 12,000 children a year. It's a relatively new programme. It certainly hasn't been going on since the 1980s. It's a cohesive programme now that we've launched and established in 2019. And we have really high impact with our sessions. So just one example which I love to tell people about is that we had a non-verbal child at one of our pond dipping sessions at Camley Street, and they were so excited to see a pond creature that they actually spoke for the first time. So we have real impact, and that's just like one of the things that always sticks in my mind. And then I'll move on to our youth programme. So our education programmes are aimed at 0 to 11, as I said, and our youth programmes are aimed at sort of 11 to 25, that age bracket. We kicked off this work in 2017 with a project called Keeping It Wild, because we wanted to address this drop-off of engagement and interest after the primary school age group. We're now in our second phase, and it's been a highly successful programme. And we have 95% of our trainees, which are paid traineeships, coming from Black, Asian and minoritized ethnic communities, 36% with a disability, and 61% living in lower socioeconomic postcodes. So it's a particularly targeted programme, and it's about offering an alternative to the traditional route, which is volunteering through a paid traineeship, which has been super successful, with 75% of our trainees going on to jobs in the sector, or further training or education. So very high percentages, very successful programme that works. And happy to say that several of our trainee alumni now work at London Wildlife. So a lot of people in my team have come through the scheme. So we're creating this pipeline of talent ready to work in the sector, which is really exciting. For our learning programmes, these are where we deliver those programmes. So we have 35 nature reserves across London, but we don't deliver education and youth programmes across all of them. I'd say these are sort of our most easily accessible sites, and yeah, the best places to deliver the programmes. So Camley Street Natural Park's not a great photograph, but if you're ever in King's Cross, please do go and visit. The site is an old Victorian coal drop, and if you go to the site, you'll be able to see some interpretation around the Regent's Canal, which runs alongside the coal drop, and the new visitor centre is inspired by the coal industry, canals being used to transport coal to London, and then it being taken around by horse and cart to fuel London's economy. So it's a lovely site to visit, and we were supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we had 3 interpretation themes. One was around the industrial heritage of the site as a coal drop, and also the natural heritage of the species and the habitats on the site. It's essentially a demonstration of different habitats that you can achieve, and the social heritage, so how people came together in the local community to save the site from being turned into a coach park by the GLC, which was the original plan. So there's lots of lovely history, so do go and visit, and you can find out more on our website as well about that. We also deliver a lot of programmes at Walthamstow Wetlands. So as was mentioned, this was Europe's, well, it is an operational Thames Water reservoir. So Thames Water are our partners, and it is, we think, Europe's largest urban wetland. It's a triple SI, it's a Ramsar site, so it's international importance for wildfowl. So it's a really special site, but nobody was accessing it prior to its opening in 2017, apart from anglers and the odd bird watcher. So we worked with Waltham Forest Council and Thames Water and the Heritage Fund to open it up as a nature reserve, essentially, for people. And it's right in the heart of Tottenham. It's very densely populated all around it. So what we've done by opening up as a place to go and enjoy has meant that far more people now are able to take advantage of the site, enjoy the site and get the health and wellbeing benefits of the site. Whereas previously it was just, anglers and the odd bird watcher. So now it's a much broader range of people accessing, which is great to see. Woodbury Wetlands, a similar site, much smaller in Stoke Newington. It was a reservoir that was built in 1833 that had been closed since it had opened. Not publicly accessible, again, very important for overwintering wildfowl, range of reed bed habitats, a little bit of woodland fringe around it. Through funding with Heritage Fund, we also opened it up as a visited nature reserve, and that was in 2016. And we were lucky enough to have Sir David Attenborough open it as well, which was fantastic. We also have some smaller sites. This one's in Peckham in South London, Centre for Wildlife Gardening, and Gunnersbury Triangle, that's in Chiswick. That is, again, it's got some lovely industrial heritage connects because it's in the triangle between different train lines. And Crane Park Island in Richmond on the Hounslow borders. This is an old gunpowder shot tower, which is a very interesting but damp building, which is open on Sundays. So we deliver our programs, our learning programs at all of these sites. We link everything to the curriculum, so Key Stage 1 and 2 and the Early Years Foundation. You can probably not see, but in the history section of the older age group, Key Stage 2, we do look at Victorian engineering. So the industrial history of the site does come into our programs, and it's really useful for people to understand, okay, a reservoir was built, it's now a triple SI, and now we're doing learning programs. It's very interesting to see sort of how the past has defined what it is now today, which is an amazing reservoir, well, 10 reservoirs, which is now a nature reserve. As I said, we have lots of impact through our schools. Children have seen something they've never seen before. Back to that statistic about 1 in 7 haven't visited a park or a green space with their family this year. Teachers feel more confident to use their local outdoor spaces for the curriculum. There's loads of great stuff we can say. Family learning, we have a range of different regular programs. A new one that we've trialled is Sensory Explorers, which is specifically aimed at children with special educational needs and disabilities. So that's been great, a quieter session, a lot more flexibility with how we deliver and how children can be on the nature reserves. So that's our learning programs. I'm now going to just give you a quick run through of our youth programs. As I mentioned, our paid traineeships have been super successful. This is Chantel. She's in my team now, delivering a couple of projects. And she was also spotted by CBeebies. She's the presenter on CBeebies as well, which is fantastic. We do great stuff with our trainees. They are essentially placed within the organisation and they get to assist with the learning programmes, our community programmes. They learn practical conservation, how to manage the landscape. And the entry through this programme, you don't have to have any prior experience. You just have to have a passion and excitement about wanting to learn, wanting to enter the sector. So yeah, a real mix of graduates, non-graduates, people in work, people who want a career change, and, you know, really impactful stories of progression. What have they done after this scheme? And it's a 4-month scheme, so it's not a long one. It's 4 months, and in that time, they are, by the end of it, ready to get a job in the sector. What's been really important for this scheme have been communications, making sure that the youth voice is coming through our communications channels. So on Instagram, our trainees write blogs, and they do Instagram takeovers. And yeah, it's interesting when we speak to young people applying, we say, how did you hear about it? It's often that they've seen a post on Instagram, or they've read a blog, or they've seen a piece of video footage. So the communications have been really essential in the success of the programme. We also have a youth board now. It's a couple of years old, and we have young people who are now influencing London Wildlife Trust and acting as a soundboard. And also alongside that, we have a mentoring scheme. So each one of our youth board is paired with a senior member of staff or a trustee, and they have one-to-one mentoring online to really help them with their progression. So it's very much a two-way process, which is great. We also have a Green Careers Showcase annually at Walthamstow Wetlands. So if you know of any organisations that might want to be one of our partners, we have Bankside Open Spaces Trust. I know you're here today, have attended this. Very successful again. We get about 100, 130 people coming to that. It's aimed at young people and helping them to see into the sector what opportunities are available, because I think it's probably fair to say careers advice at schools doesn't really cover our kind of sector. So it's been really a great initiative to do, and I think we've done about 3 so far, 3 annual events. So the next one will be in July. Just to take you through a couple of projects. So we're doing this project which was funded by the Arts Council, Volunteering Futures, and it's about bringing together the creative arts with the conservation to make a very appealing offering to young people, to enable more young people to get interested in volunteering and conservation. So we've had some amazing guest artists who have worked with us, which has been fantastic. And we released an anthology this year, which is available on our website if you'd like to read. And that contains poetry, music, zines, lots of different creative projects that young people have submitted for this. Just wanted to highlight our research report, which we completed in March, called Seeding Change. And looked into what the barriers specifically for women of colour and non-binary people of colour face in accessing conservation volunteering. So this is on our website. If you search Seeding Change, you'll be able to find it. The key findings from this were around safety, relevancy and accessibility, which I'll come on to right at the end. Also running a community organising programme. So how this is part of the Wildlife Trust national initiative. How do we enable young people to act for nature and the climate through community organising? So it's something that the Wildlife Trust nationally are working on, and it's called Next Door Nature. We're taking an online approach, how we can support people to be able to take action in their own local communities. I'll just quickly take you through the Great North Wood. This is our landscape scale project. We've delivered 2 phases, but you can probably just see on the map here, the green is what used to be the Great North Wood, a wooded landscape in South London, and the orange is what is left. And what is left is a mixture of parks, small woodlands in urban areas, and so there's only fragments left. So the project was really about highlighting these fragments were part of a wider landscape, and really bringing that into people's minds in the modern urban landscape. So it's a really successful project. This is the phase 2 slide here that I'm going to talk to. So it worked across 22 woodlands, parks and green spaces across 5 London boroughs. So our 2 project officers here are all over the place, working with volunteers, really building a sense of community around people's local woodlands, which is a really successful project. Some stats here about what was achieved. Huge community of volunteers built up. We work with friends of groups and local authorities and landowners to achieve the project. Massive amount of events were delivered, so that's family events, the Great North Wood Festival on Streatham Common. So masses of people were engaged, very successful. People seem to be really interested in the history of the Great North Wood and really sort of helps them link to their local area and build that sense of community. We do have a film that we've made. This is on our website, on YouTube as well. The voiceover is by Chantal, who has featured quite a lot in this presentation. I do urge you to have a look at this. It kind of links the history of the Great North Wood and gives a lot of information. There's a lovely book as well by Chris Schuler about the history of the Great North Wood. So if you have any connection to South London, you might want to have a look at that. We're in a next phase now of reuniting Sydenham Hill Wood and Dulwich Wood. So that's the largest remaining tract of the Great North Wood that you saw on that map. So we're just in a development phase now for this project with some investment from the Heritage Fund again. So the vision for the project is to secure the long-term future of this largest piece of woodland, Dulwich Wood and Sydenham Hill Wood. 27.4 hectares of urban woodland, which during the pandemic, we had an 81% increase in visitors. So the site really got hammered. The paths widened, all of the amazing sort of ancient woodland indicated species were trodden on. We all had to go to our local green spaces and people discovered the woods for the first time. So the 81% increase really meant that we were able to say to the Heritage Fund, we really need investment to protect the woodlands, but also engage a wider range of people in the woodland and benefit from the woodland, because the site has lots of social housing estates right on the doorstep. So we're working closely with them as well. Just a little map to show you. So Southwark is up here, Cox's Walk, this is Sydenham Hill Wood, and this is Dulwich Wood. So it's one in the same woodland, but it has two managers. So we manage Sydenham Hill Wood, that's one of our earliest nature reserves. In fact, it was our first nature reserve. And Dulwich Wood is managed by the Dulwich Estate. So we're working in partnership with them to really bring the management of these two important woodlands together. We're in the development phase now, and then there'll be a 3-year delivery phase. We've done a lot of consultation. We had over 400 people reply to our online survey, but interestingly, the demographic of those people were mainly over 65 and mainly white. So on top of that consultation, we've also been working with partners. So we work a lot with Black Girls Hike, a fantastic organisation. If you haven't heard of them, do go on their website and have a look. And we ran a Great North Wood walk with Black Girls Hike, and we got their feedback on what they would like to see in the delivery phase of the project. We've also been conducting a lot of ecological surveys. You can see our trainees in this picture, current trainees who've been assisting with the ecological survey with our consultants, which has been really great. A lot of the capital works are perhaps a little bit boring to talk about, which is mainly path works, as I said, to make sure that people are walking on paths, going a particular route around the woodlands to protect tree roots from being exposed and the ground flora from being affected. So it's a fantastic project, but I just wanted to sort of bring together this slide, some key learnings, which I think would be important for everybody to hear around how communities can best get involved in landscape and in green spaces, particularly urban green spaces. So for us, in our Seeding Change report that I mentioned, it really unearthed that, we all know as a sector there's a lot of barriers that people face in accessing landscapes, accessing green spaces. And really, I think as a sector, what we need to do is really understand why the barriers exist in the first place, rather than just to try and fix the barriers. So that's the piece of work we want to take forward as a next step, is to really kind of uncover why barriers exist in the first place. As I mentioned, we have some great partners. It's really been key. So I think, back in the old days when I worked at the Trust, we tended to partner with other organisations in the sector, environmental sector. But now we're more focused on creating partners who are not in our sector. So it's cross-sector partnerships that have been really, really important. So, for example, we worked with London Youth, which is an umbrella body for the youth clubs in London. We work with Black Girls Hike, Wanderers of Colour. We're working with some Orthodox Jewish communities, organisations as well. So the partnerships across sectors have been really, really helpful and important. What we're finding, the feedback from people on our programmes, are that they really like to connect with like-minded people. So building that sense of community has been super important. So quite often, particularly young people might feel that they're the odd one out, or they're viewed as a bit strange because they're interested in wildlife and nature. And when you connect them up with other people that have the same interest, they're like, I found my tribe, I found my sense of community. So this has been a really key learning for us, that, you know, as an organisation, we should be aiming more to bring like-minded people together from all backgrounds to create change, to mobilise and to do something about nature and the climate. Representation and relevancy, creating safe spaces. I think really the sector's had this open day approach. We're open to everybody, come and see us, but reversing that into creating spaces that feel safe for different communities has been quite eye-opening, really. So when we ran our Seeding Change research, we brought particular groups of, for example, Muslim women together, and they really appreciated us holding a space for people like themselves, whereas they wouldn't necessarily come and access an open volunteering session, for example. So creating those safe spaces has been very, very important. And as I say, communications has been really important, representation of young people through our channels, and accessibility. So the paid opportunities have been really important, online opportunities. I think we learned quite a lot in the pandemic that everyone had to move everything online. But actually, by doing that, we did learn that doing some stuff online has really helped engage a wider range of people. So what good things can we keep from that very difficult time? Online, I think, has been brilliant, particularly for the younger age group. Food and travel costs, that's always key. And quite often organisations say, yes, we pay volunteer expenses, but then nobody really claims, nobody really asks, and then that creates a barrier for those that need to. So some summary learnings, hopefully that will be useful to hear. And as I said, our partners, I just wanted to show you who our partners, I mean, this isn't all of our partners, it's just some of them. Some funders, some community organisations. But without our partners, you know, we wouldn't be able to deliver such fantastic programmes across the London landscape. So that was all I was going to say, but if anyone has any questions, I'm sure I'd be happy to chat those over.
Thank you very, very much for that presentation here. I'm particularly interested to hear of your partnership with the Dulwich Estate, because I'm a potholder on the Bankside allotments, and I've never seen a hedgehog. I'm also a potholder who's actually passionate about slugs and stills, and so I've managed to persuade our shop to stop being colour pellets, but they still stock phosphate pellets. There are hedgehogs, I believe, in Melwood.
There are, yeah.
However, I would suggest that there might well be an opportunity with the Dulwich Estate, where the freeholders of the two allotments on Grange Lane, together with the playing fields, together with the freeholders, I understand, that sit in the Dulwich and St Mirren golf course, are extending pesticide management to a far bigger area than just the woods. I noticed and applaud your hedge cutting along Grange Lane. Is there any movement in that direction?
There is. So just to give you some background, so in the 1980s, we were at loggerheads with Dulwich Estate. We had a very bad relationship because we wanted to save Southern Hill Wood from being developed. And it became our first nature reserve. So we haven't had a very good relationship in the 80s, even into the 90s, but through looping them in as a partner into the Great North Wood project, we've really built our partnership with them, and it's a really great partnership now. And I think they are really thinking now around a green strategy for the estate. So we're helping them with that. That's in the pipeline. So they are looking at how they can be more green as an organisation. And yeah, we're working closely with them on the Sydenham Dulwich Bringing Together project. And I think, yeah, the new CEO there, well, she's not that new anymore, Simone Crofton, she is very passionate about opening up green spaces that are on the estate that are closed. So some really good, some thoughts around how to improve the biodiversity of the estate. And they are thinking about it. There's somebody leading this new green strategy there now.
Can I just ask a very short supplementary, maybe just a suggestion, I think, to the Dulwich estate. Certainly with the gunsight allotments, it's a lease agreement with the Dulwich estate, and they could insert a no pesticide policy into that lease agreement. Some of my fellow plot holders wouldn't dream of it. It would be a good thing if they could.
Yeah,
okay, that's a detailed discussion. I'm sure you can at the end, right at the end. Yes, yes.
Yes, I thought it was really fascinating, and lots of resonances. I think that work's happening here at the museum as well, particularly with our forest school work that we do, and our work around green spaces that we do as part of our Arts Council national portfolio work. But I just wondered whether you'd connected up with the sanctuary movement that's all around this, because this is kind of an area we're moving into, museums and libraries are very much moving into. I wonder whether there's a connection with open spaces being, I mean, it's obviously a very different thing. Sanctuary feels like it needs to be within buildings, but I just wonder whether there are connections that you're being made around there, around environmental. We're very lucky here. We're talking about sanctuary. We've got this very enclosed garden.
Not specifically. I am a trustee of a museum up in Manchester, actually, so I'm kind of learning more about the museum sector through that, which has been great. But yeah, in terms of that statistic around mental health and people's well-being being significantly affected as a result of the pandemic, and particularly young people's well-being, we have recently started a first, really, which is a new contract with the NHS, with the CAM service in Newham. So we're delivering a new initiative called Nature in Mind. And what we're doing is we're trying to connect children and young people with nature in order to benefit their well-being. And it's people that have been referred to the CAM service, so children and adolescent mental health services. However, the waiting list is so long that ours is an intervention to allow people to wait well while they're waiting to get to see that practitioner. There's various initiatives that they can access, one of which is Nature in Mind with us at Walthamstow Wetlands. They also have capoeira, boxing, group therapy sessions, all of those kind of things, dance. So yeah, we're definitely interested in that mental health angle, as are the Wildlife Trust nationally.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Helen?
People on this probably a fresh class of all stages that are interested in the mechanics and background for financing and management of the delivery of management. And I would say the volunteer angle is simply volunteers because more somebody's always ways to be quick spots on you got change.
So we have a conservation team. For example, at Walthamstow Wetlands, we have a conservation officer, we have a management plan. So all the volunteering that's delivered relates to that management plan delivered by the conservation officer. So, I mean, it varies across different sites, but yes, how you're describing it is true. I mean, we have the management plan, and then that is used to define the volunteering tasks, and we do offer our volunteers expenses. So yeah, very similar.
For you, son.
Very similar to how you're describing it. In terms of the finances, I mean, you can go on the Charity Commission website and you can have a look at our income and our expenditure, but we are lucky in that we have diversified our income. That pie chart that you'll see on the Charity Commission, we've diversified it and we've really focused on diversifying it so we're not reliant on one particular income strand. Yeah, so it's varied. Some of it's commercial, some of it's membership, some of it's grants. Most of my team is funded by grants at the moment.
Yeah. Right, Catherine.
On security, so I grew up on Sydenham Hill in the 70s.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure at that time the woods were completely closed off or very sparingly open. So there was a perceived risk about them and an actual risk, you know, if there were incidents. And it was also where we all went as teenagers to buy illicit substances. If you still have problems.
Yeah, so we've been liaising with the community police team because there are the odd problem, and one of the things we want to do in the new project in the delivery phase is to create more of a presence in the woods. So at Camley Street, Walthamstow, we have these volunteer roles called meet and greet. So they'll do a bit of litter picking, a bit of answering questions, directing visitors, checking the soap in the toilets, all kinds of things. So the meet and greet volunteers, we'd like to introduce that initiative into Sydenham Hill Wood, and having that presence of people, not patrolling, not policing, but just a presence of people will definitely make people feel safer. And particularly with our Black Girls Hike consultation, safety came up as a big priority. So women particularly don't feel safe going into the woods. And also if they were to go in a group, like, you know, are they going to get stared at? Are they going to feel safe? There are obviously safety in numbers. But yeah, safety is a big thing that we're aware of. And so what we're going to be doing, as well as the volunteering opportunity to create that presence, we're going to put some interpretation, a bit of wayfinding. It's very easy to get lost in those woods. It's my local woodlands, but I get lost in there. So, you know, if you've never been before, what hope do you have of getting out of there again? So yeah, so we're looking at a range of things, working with Accessible UK to audit from cold. Like, we haven't given them an introduction. We said, right, go into the woods and tell us what you think. So they're doing this great audit to look at access. And that's, you know, physical access as well as intellectual.
Right.
Question. I'm very interested in your safe spaces work, and I'm wondering, coming from the background of being an organizer in a group that consists by and large of white middle class type people. How do you go about it? Were you working very closely with organisations in their specific communities to actually get things like that off the ground, or what?
Yeah, as I said, representation has been very, very important, and now we have more of a diverse staff team. We're finding that, for example, one of our trainees had a Somali background, and we had a school visit Woodbury Wetlands with a huge number of Somali children with Somali background families, and they were just so kind of happy and shocked just to see a Somali young person getting involved and leading the education sessions, but they engaged so well because they saw a role model, essentially. So this idea of representation and role modeling really does work to make different communities feel comfortable and think, oh, this is something for me. I can see myself doing practical nature conservation or delivering an education session. So I think representation has been
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. In terms of, you mentioned your traineeship schemes, which I think is a really great advantage in a way. How do you think that differs to an apprenticeship? And also what sort of qualifications do you offer as part of that training?
Yeah, so it's a lot less paperwork. I think we've delivered more formalised apprenticeship type programmes in the past, and there's a huge sort of admin and learning journals and lots of computer work that people have to do, whereas this traineeship, it's a lot more flexible. So we have a timetable, it's very hands-on, it's very practical, and young people, you know, if they think at the beginning of it, oh, okay, I really like practical outdoors, I want to get involved in that more, they might, through tasting all the different experiences, think, actually, I really like community engagement, I really like delivering to school children. And then we sort of amend their timetable and boost up the things that they're most interested in towards the end of the 4-month period. So it's a lot more tailored, and it's a lot more kind of practical, because what we were hearing was, you know, people maybe have a degree in biological science, something like that, or landscape management or whatever, but they don't have the practical experience, so therefore they can't get a job. So we were getting people saying, I've applied for all these jobs and I can't get anything because I don't have any practical experience. And then after the traineeship, they're getting interviews and they're able to get a job because they do have that practical experience, whereas the sector expects that they go and do some volunteering, but they can't because they need to earn money. So it's worked really well in that respect.
So I welcome Guy Redmond, talking about developing community and cultural landscapes, practical guys. And Guy is also a landscape architect specializing in community and cultural landscapes, school grounds, country parks, parish, council land, and I'm sure much more than this. And his company Leaves of Green was established in 2002 and encourages all year round access to natural places and to observe and share nature's abundance and seasonal beauty. The company's low carbon footprint designs and installations are template which can be achieved by any community using their own resources. So
thank you, Carolin. Yeah. Good morning, all. Thank you for being here and listening. I'm an art historian, and then I'm a gardener horticulturalist, and then I was a landscape architect, in that order. Previous to that, I was a very naughty boy, but I'll stay in details. So I've been working with schools since the mid-1990s, and this is the kind of environment I first came into and was asked to do something with it. Depressingly, there's still a lot of schools that look like this today. But they could be much, much better. When I first came into it, 300 quid was a good sized budget. I thought, what do you lot of that? But then it was mainly planting trees to start with. But then the head teacher would say, look, we want a storytelling area, or we want a place where we can eat outdoor lunches or be together. And where would you put a storytelling area here? So there was a whole range of associated factors which need to be worked out before we can start to think about how you do these places. I met a head teacher of a school in Worcestershire who asked me to come and meet her kids, and they had a budget of £30,000, and they wanted to. The brief was a natural adventure playground, second to none. This was working with the children. So I put together a bit of a design for this thing from the tarmac and the grass fields. What happened was they were asked to get a little bit more land from the local community allotments, which weren't being used, so that they managed to push their boundaries out a little bit. That meant we could take the oversized football pitch and actually squeeze it into a much smaller pitch for five-a-side football at the end. We could create a range of outdoor learning environments, good accessibility, a mound with a tunnel through it, and good nature connections. And 15 to 20 years later, this is the kind of environment that's at this school. the long-term sense of place that you're developing is absolute key. School grounds are the only places set aside for children to spend a certain amount of time while they're growing up, and all positive relationships with the natural world are formed in the early years. So just those 2 points alone show you how important these places are. That was the opening of the site, 2002, the Queen's Jubilee, and this is what it looks like today. So this kind of environment is very, very interesting for children. The fact that they can run around, explore, you know, the permeability is wonderful for them. When I first got involved in the design for this, I was reading absolute classic. Anyone know that one? Yeah. Gordon Cullen. And on this page, there were 2 pages together. One was about the hollow enclosure and how it offers security, a lessening of the intensity of light, and it's a place separated from the main hustle and bustle of the traffic. And also this one, the vertical point of congregation, the focal point, the market cross, the maypole, whatever it is. The point about when you've arrived, you're here, this is it, you've got there. So by putting these both together into this design, it seemed to work pretty well. So the medieval architectural design seems to work very well for a certain age group. The other thing from Cullen was the sequential journey. Now, I know you all know about that, serial vision. Wherever his arrows are, you're getting the corresponding view. We're leading the pedestrian, the user around the site by means of focal points, you know, drama and all the rest of it. And in this project, we did the same. I did the same. And it's worked very well to this day. One of the things we did with this particular project was that they wanted their community to be involved. The best way I thought we could get people involved was actually helping to lay out some of the path networks. So we got a load of logs in. In these days, we used to use bark, and we had some railway sleepers to build some steps up the mound. This was on a Saturday, sort of 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock. If you can get 30 people there, you're going to save yourself £3,000 to £5,000 worth of costs, and you can achieve a hell of a lot of stuff, and everybody has a good time. The clicker seems to stop. Yeah, some. Sorry about that. But the focus is good. So, I mean, yeah, okay. Sorry. Yeah, happy with that? I think we'll just have to say with that, thanks very much for trying that. Yeah, it's nice to have a big screen, but anyway. Yeah, so this is the kind of thing that's happening, and this is what it looked like at the end of it. And, you know, maintenance is key in schools. You know, there's no maintenance. Nobody's going to come in and do anything, so it has to be bomb-proof. You've got to take away the mowing regimes. You've got to get the gang mowers swooping around but not touching your trees. Your outer trees are going to actually be sacrificial. They're the ones that the mowers and the trimmers are going to hit, and the rest are inside. The long grasses are okay, but you have to obviously keep the grasses away from the trees. Giant redwood, infill of native deciduous plants, some bamboo. There was willow tunnels and things put in there, and that's what it looks like today. Same place. You can literally develop each, you know, follow each tree growing up. The kind of activities that take place here are these kind of gathering nature's free gifts type things. And this school has achieved 3 consecutive outstanding Ofsteds, and the roll is full to bursting with a waiting list. and it's the kind of place which parents want to send their kids to. The nature thing is absolutely key. The positive relationship with nature formed in the early years. I've actually transposed this slide onto a series of handouts if you're interested. It's a whole load of references about why nature is great for children and all the different benefits they can get. And importantly, that, and also on this page, all the references of where they come from. So if you ever need to have some rationale for doing a project, it's all on that sheet. Here's another example. This is in Oxford, city centre. It's an early years foundation stage. This is the kind of landscape that we come up against, and this is the kind of thing that's been developed over years by the community. It's an unconnected early years landscape for some reason. I mean, they can understand why this kind of thing is built. Sort of fairy tale castle, built by some kind of really enthusiastic father. But why do they put a fence across what is essentially a border? You know, God knows. But we can take this design and actually make much more connected corridors and a range of play equipment set within a natural foundation. You can still use it all year round. All of the features in this particular school, and it's actually quite a big landscape, are designed to increase upper body strength for young children. This is the single most important thing that will develop their gross motor skills and hence their handwriting and their finer motor skills. Just to go back to that, it was the actual investment in a concept design that I persuaded the head teacher to undertake that managed to get this kind of thing happening. Most of the time in schools, design is offered by playground equipment companies for free. This is the kind of thing you get. This is a sort of example. Actually probably look very good on paper, but it's a high carbon footprint, a lot of glue and rubber. It offers very little learning and play opportunities with very little natural enhancement. That was £25,000. We could produce that for £30,000, and actually it's quite a more extensive landscape. Also take sites like this. This is in Battersea. It was an unused asphalt surface. It's actually rubber on top of asphalt. And we can turn it into this. A range of learning environments with nature connections. What we're looking to do is get nature connections all year round. Access is key. This school, Griffin, is in Battersea, just near Vauxhall. They invested in a very low-cost concept design with a range of precedent photos of similar projects that we've done to persuade the decision makers. One of the problems you've got are your governors. The head teacher might really be into doing some work, but then the governors can't understand why anyone would want to spend 1,500 quid on a concept design if the playground equipment company are going to do it for free. So, you know, this is how it works. But in this particular example, it actually worked pretty well. The other thing that we did with this project was we got the kids involved in actually helping us build it. So yeah, different classes came out every day. And yeah, I mean, this is in mid-October. It's wet. This guy's on his knees trying to get a stone out of the ground, you know. Absolutely loving it. And yeah. Yeah. What happened was there was 18 inches of hardcore foundation actually, which we I left half of it in and just put some topsoil back in. So it's actually old brick and dust. It's actually quite fertile, so it's better to leave it there. But it actually, you know, we found lots of bricks, and we've actually found some marble old curbstones as well. But you know, we also left a lot of stuff in there so that the kids could actually dig it up themselves. And this was a very interesting experience for them too. And yeah, most of these children actually live in second and third floor flats, and a lot of them have never actually even dug into the earth before. So it's a great opportunity. I don't know if anyone knows this work. It was the reason why Learning Through Landscapes became successful. It's Wendy Titman, and she did this book called Special Places, Special People. It showed that the design, management and maintenance of school grounds, every feature associated with it, either negative or positive, actually has significant messages for children. I mean, schools are the only place set aside for them anyway, and so everything within the school day, from the lessons to the break at lunchtime, and anything in the school grounds is a signifier as to their relationship with adults, their relationship with their culture, and obviously with nature as well. So this is great stuff. And I know Wendy, and she lives down in Falmouth now. So Forest Schools is really currently flying the flag for outdoor learning. Scouts have lost 25% of their members over the last 3 years. They've become obsessed with the health and safety. But Forest Schools is actually about risk assessment. It's actually about managing your own risk assessment. I was one of a team that introduced Forest Schools into the UK in the 1990s in the Midlands. And this is that same Battersea project. It's at the other end of the site from the photo I showed you, but showing you that a range of outdoor learning environments with different character are important as well. These are the curbstones we found when we were digging the place up. Absolutely fantastic things. Now, Forest Schools, I mean, just coming back to your point about, a lot of kids after primary school are losing connections to nature. What we've seen in primary schools is that by the time they get to 9, 10, 11, their forest school restrictions are actually quite limited. But there's been quite a large amount of children demanding to do forest schools as well. It's now just coming into secondary schools. So this could be a bit of a game changer when it comes to those important connections. This is a school in Peterborough, which has put in a big forest school area. They've got World War I reenactment scenarios happening here. Some sort of shelter, create and craft, and God knows what. Plus the classic sort of medieval kind of village design, which seems to work very well for them. Now, I could have shown you a whole load of photos to do with this. We've worked with Leighton Sixth Form College in North London, and this one in Peterborough. These are really the first two, and I think it's going to fast track into secondary schools now, because a lot of the research is showing that learning reading abilities can go up dramatically in just a 6-week period. I've got a lot of research for that as well. But there's only so much whittling sticks, building dens, and things you could do at a secondary school level. I mean, really, the activities which should be coming in here is going to be advanced den making, that is exploring co-housing and affordable building. These kind of things could be fantastic. And of course, cooking and things like this as well. Absolutely wonderful places to get, fellow students to come down and sample some of the cuisine on offer. And lots of other things which really, waiting to come out. The most important thing any school can do right now is to make their grounds accessible all year round. Most schools are only accessible for 3 months of the year or when it's dry. So we need to create what I call the nature trail. The nature trail concept actually comes from a very interesting school called the Coombs School in Reading. It's actually in Reading, just outside Reading. Does anybody know it? Yes. Okay, well, they had some wonderful things happening in the 1980s and 1990s. And so I've kind of picked up that baton and kind of gone with it as well. But essentially, here's a school in sort of northwest London, Northolt. They wanted to put a forest school area right on the other side of the field where there was no infrastructure and nothing to sort of get people interested. But they had this avenue that had maybe been put in 25 or 30 years ago. So I suggested that we could move it over here and create a range of, outdoor learning environments and make them accessible all year round. So essentially, this is all recycled materials. It's road planings, it's quality wood chip on top, and there's a whole load of different products available today which are good for wheeled vehicles and different types of access. And obviously English coppiced hardwood logs. Widening out into those areas where lots of people can get together, forest all at the back where they can actually develop it over the next few years. Then you put your planting in, some of which are, within beds, some of which are obviously sheltered. And this one is now on its way to being a very interesting place. Dramatic features like this, the Willow Tunnel, again, this is a sequential journey. It's the anticipation of what's up ahead. These can be added at any time. Planting is absolutely key. This was a project from 2005. The school sort of thought they were getting one project, which was to do with this medieval village type thing with these huts, and there was a maypole and storytelling area. And they thought the trees were sort of a bit of an add-on. Actually, really, they're the most important thing, because this is 15 years later or so. You can still see these are magnolias, clump of magnolias. This is a North African cedar, Cedrus deodara. It's an Himalayan cedar, I think, and quality conifers, which don't need so much protection in that they're feathered to the ground. But I think that evergreens are absolutely key for schools. They've got winter structure and shelter, and they have a whole host of benefits for communities and for wildlife. If you're interested in trees, Alan Mitchell was a big advocate of conifers. But they do require the protection, standalone trees. This is, again, that project at Harvington. That's a teepee in the background, nothing to do really with the photo, but this was, the height of running and chasing games in 2001. The maturing landscape, same view, shows that the playing opportunities are very different. Still do the running and chasing, but here it's the imaginative role play, secretive communications, which is really, as you change that diversity beneath ground, so it offers lots of opportunities above ground as well. Parish councils, just to touch on this, these are the trends: halting the loss of natural heritage and increasing biodiversity. And for people, it's about mental health and well-being. These are the trends we're seeing around the country. Obviously, it's the same in London and wherever you are. This is the National Lottery Communities Fund homepage. Absolute fantasy. The idea of a load of people turning out to maintain a manicured landscape like that is something I've never witnessed in my life at all. I mean, it's a nice thing to get to, but it's about as realistic as having the winning lottery ticket as well. But the kind of things that people are best to do in groups is the path making. This is an Oxfordshire project where 30 adults came together on a Saturday and they moved logs, they put wood chip in. Guys turned out with his tractor and his trailer. It was reviving the spirit of the Dunkirk enterprise here. The other thing that's great for communities is artwork. These are pyrographic panels, which we've done a lot of over the years, and they're very effective. They're very low cost, and they last for years as well. But these are the things, this thing you do last of all. This is personalization, the last stage. This is a typical parish council view in Worcestershire. Large village, just on the borders of Worcester. They bought a 15 acre field, because it had it's a very long site with views spreading over the whole site. There were sort of cues in the landscape as to this kind of visibility right down the middle of the site could actually be an avenue. So worked with the community on this idea of the avenue. And it went to pre-app, and they were very disappointed by the avenue. It was alien, it shouldn't fit into this landscape. I argued sort of passionately in the pre-app that it was a navigational tool for families and kids running around. They could be on their own, and then they could locate each other easily. Plus, it was a very nice view out of the side. But in the end, we mitigated the whole thing and actually called it a meadow corridor. That was fantastic. Didn't get enough of the meadow corridor. Apart from that, that's sort of irrelevant, but this is a range of biodiversity. It's all the villages over here, so easy navigational techniques to come in. Areas for sort of seasonal celebrations, bonfire night, forest stalls, that footpath with the natural play items on it. Again, this is a sequential journey, in a natural landscape. This was part of the design and access statement. Some of these photos I think I've put up before, but the most interesting environment for children is one that they can manipulate their own environment and build things. Play equipment, not so important. It's a little bit ramshackle list, but I'm just jumping from one to another. This is just part of this project that I helped this community achieve. Woodland design is absolutely key. You have to have a diversity of habitat within the woodland. You want, beech trees, which encourage very little ground flora. Obviously the oak and hazel, which will obviously proliferate in that. You want coppice areas, you want open meadows. Planting design is really key. And some of Nigel Dunnett, James Hitchler's work, I think they're up in York. But this is an essay from there, which is Roland Gustafson, Exploring Woodland Design. Absolutely fantastic work. Play equipment, Worcester Woods Country Park, 2011, a project which I actually built and then updated in 2021. You can see where we've put the trees in. This is 10 years old. These are birch trees. So in another 10 years, they'll probably be 3 times that size. But the idea of a playground having living trees, you can't actually bulldoze it out and put a new one in. You're beginning to use that natural sense of place to actually evolve the features within it. This place receives about 750,000 visitors a year. There's a cafe right next to the toddler play area, which is one of the reasons why it's so popular. But these boulders and things will protect the embankment. And a destination player with that many visitors does warrant a lot of different play equipment. Personally, I prefer things that encourage group play, compound supernova, basket swings, whatever they are. These are all good for people playing together. This was another site where this is a natural play site in Worcestershire, with these sort of bridges running and chasing games and standing stones, which sort of appeal to, it's on the banks of the River Severn actually, which appealed to the ancient sort of sense of place of this, essentially what is a green space in a council estate, which is used for banger racing and things like that. So yeah, very little fixed play equipment. The enhancement of the overriding sense of place will encourage users to linger, explore, play spontaneously, and feel a sense of belonging. You don't need play equipment. Children will happily play spontaneously if they feel a sense of belonging to the environment that they're in. And if we can instill it with ownership by getting them to be involved in the project as well. That is the biggest win-win situation. So I've just put some things about school landscapes. It could apply to parish councils as well. Design work is important. The grounds should be accessible all year round. Inner city schools, obviously I've got to identify a hard surface for transformation back to nature if they've got the space. And grounds maintenance contractors need to have a relevant knowledge of biodiversity, habitat management.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe some of your, budding ecologists and community people will be the next generation to be able to do this. When it comes to secondary schools, by connecting children into these kind of things as well, there's no reason why secondary school children can go into primary schools and actually work with that age group in order to actually make these grounds better. That's it. I hope you liked it.
Thank you, much, Guy. Any questions? Right at the end. Again.
If that's okay. I wish you'd been here yesterday. You've seen 100 people outside about forest.
That's a great guy.
On the fires. And so that's my question really, is that kind of taking it outside the formal educational setting. I realise we kind of are a university, so in some ways we are a formal educational setting. We're not a formal educational setting for under fives.
Yeah.
Is that, how unusual is that? What are the particular challenges around going away from schools when they've got the kind of control on the fence around it, those kinds of things? They're not letting the public.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's actually, to be honest, it's a fence. It's actually made schools worse. It means that you can't be used at weekends. Whereas I think, if the fences weren't there, there'd be greater access, and actually school grounds would be better. I think what's happened is teachers are overloaded with work as it is. Plus they got the fence around it, nobody could use it. And so when it comes to actually deciding whether you want to actually do an interesting development in the school or not, a lot of teachers, head teachers, are maybe deciding it's better to do the 5,000 thing out of the catalogue for now, rather than get me in and do a design and a larger development in the end. But for your space, I mean, absolutely amazing space, and that needs a little bit more accessible footpaths and things like that. That's what I noticed this morning. But key spaces, we're not short of green parks and areas which people can access. We just need to make them easy to get around all year round, and have aspects of personalisation and ownership that they can really respond to. I think Britain is a great country, personally. I mean, we've got a culture which goes back, at least 5,000 years of managing our settled landscapes. And I think we have got a very nation. I've lived in a lot of other countries, and they haven't got half of what we've got. So we need to really encourage that as well.
Yes, thank you very much. Although I think sort of when you have inner cities and also drug abuse and all these sort of things, opening gateways in a school environment is very difficult.
Sure.
You need to have extra management.
For
for
sure.
that.
Oh no, for sure. I'm not saying you should knock all the fences down. It's just one of those things that's happened, but maybe it will change.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great, thank you. The lady in the back.
I think out of America, I just want to say that our school playgrounds are open on the weekends.
Right.
You can't get into the school, obviously.
Is this in the United States?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that it was specifically one school in my hometown where you would see after school or on weekends, older kids bring their younger siblings.
Right.
Older siblings would be on swings, older kids would be skateboarding.
Yeah.
Adults would be playing basketball on the basketball courts. I think that, to me, I'm a landscape architect.
Okay.
Right now, we did schools last year for our projects. I was shocked that you couldn't. You just to me, it's playground.
Yeah, and they're great safe spaces as well.
I actually had a different question that was kind of about convincing people to change their minds and to be open to more green playgrounds. I think
Are you talking about out of school hours? Or how do we try to get people to change their minds? I don't know. I mean, I have enough work to keep me busy, but I work with over 500 schools, and you know that's a very low, and it has actually no influence on any other schools. So you know, after 2 or 3 years, they've forgotten who the hell they are. I mean, I go back to schools and they say we've got this area here. Well, what can we do with it? And it's wonderful kind of woodland. I actually planted it out, 20 years ago, and now we've turned it into a forest school. Then I'm the wiser. So obviously you need some political influence, really, saying that really they need to invest in some front-end design work in order to, and the key is to make the grounds accessible all year round. And the green backdrop, there are studies in Canada that show that schools with trees give better learning results. And actually schools that have both evergreen and deciduous trees do even better. So, there's a lot more that could come out of this. And you also need practitioners, because there's a bit of a grey area between garden design and landscape architecture. The reason why I've managed to get these things together was because I was willing to go out and dig the holes. I still do, that's the only way you're going to get these projects done, because the budgets are tight. But the benefits are really good.
That's really good to know. The lady there, Black. Sorry, yes.
It's very easy question that I think it's the that I've been finding is that big slopes are becoming much more interested in green space and moving away from the traditional playgrounds. I don't know if you're still finding that. We're doing a number of jobs in schools at the moment with sustainable drainage systems, so open swales, the wildflowers, planting. And such, and we're finding that schools are really excited and really engaged in this. They're using it specifically in the older schools, the older children, they're using it as part of their curriculum for biodiversity, climate change, these sorts of things that are really key in schools at the moment. Point of branding currently, and I think they're here to see it.
Undoubtedly, the opportunities are fantastic, and obviously in schools, all children are learning about, protection of the planet and, looking after the earth. Well, right outside their door is where it happens.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The other thing is talking about where the parish started. As an example is in Southwark, where you've got a school that desperately needs more open space facilities for all my grades and middle school. And next door to that, a parish initiative, which is a fabulous new space, open space. And it seems to me when you come across opportunities where the school uses the parish grounds for their needs, and the parish grounds to use the school for the rest of the year, after school hours. Have you got any other examples?
I have got quite a lot of examples actually, and I can give them to you afterwards. And actually one of them's in South Oxfordshire. So, but no, there's a lot of, I think there's collaboration. But obviously they've got to be safeguarding their kids when they go out there. So there's all issues with getting them to the site and coming back. Transport's expensive, so they need to be within walking distance.
There's certainly also on the continent a lot of examples where you have inner urban, schools which have land and a bit other land around things. And they have formal play and such, and then there's just a sign, after 8 o'clock don't play football anymore, it's too noisy because people go to sleep and all these things. So, there are models around. It's just the willingness of the local community to make changes and work in partnership. So, and that is really key to unlock most of these things. Right. Thank you ever so much, everyone. Oh, Robert wants. It's not about your allotment, Robert.
Water for children.
Water. Yeah.
Oh, God.
A bog garden, probably, I can't remember actually, but well, if it's a pond, all sorts of alarm bells start ringing.
That's a working pond.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, people have lived with access to open water for thousands of years. But I think just because in England, schools and lots of children and ponds, you got to have a fence around it. I mean, look, that's what the county council want. They'll just come in and they'll spend. I mean, that looks like,
Sure.
yeah,
But not in all.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely.
Same
Yeah.
for children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When in Holland, you have a shallow area at the edge, so
Yeah.
you don't go down.
Yeah. Look, things are changing from a health and safety point of view. The risk-benefit assessment for a start, which is, if you're going to drown, probably you have to make the decision that you're, getting into there anyway. Yeah.
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Well,
I think I know you need to move on.
thank you so much, guys.
Okay.
Hands up for that. I welcome Jan Woudstra. Many of you know him, obviously. He's a reader in landscape history and culture at the Department of Landscape Architecture at the University of Sheffield. He trained horticulture and conservation in Frederiksborg in the Netherlands, at the Botanic Garden in Kew. He was at the University of York and worked as a landscape architect and obviously still also as a landscape historian. Jan was involved with Travis Morgan in lots of different large conservation schemes, including the restoration of Chiswick House grounds, the reconstruction of the Privy Garden of Hampton Court, that's where I saw Jan a lot, and Hampton Court Palace. And when that was completed, he set up his own EDA, Environmental Design Associates, in practice in 1995. He is a PhD doctor, and his PhD was on the landscape for living, landscape theory and design of the modern movement. I actually would love to read that. Done in 1997 at the University College in London, and he's taught landscape architecture and landscape history at the University of Sheffield since 1995. And I think.
That's enough.
I think that's enough, because the next paragraph really covers what you're talking about. But I really look forward to some really interesting presentation, and again, Q&A afterwards.
Well, good afternoon. Yeah. Some of you will have heard me about Robert Marnock before, but some of you may not. So Robert Marnock is a landscape designer, 19th century landscape designer, born in 1800. Till 1889, and he was referred to as the most successful landscape gardener of the 19th century. He had come from a very modest background, so-called leather pads, as I've been told by the Scots. So where someone would come from a very impoverished or non-expecting background and made it big in the world. And there were lots of Scotsmen who did so. And there was also the lasso pad, so don't be discouraged. There were opportunities for all. Born in, his father was a crofter, but so from a very modest background. I'm not going to go into it too much. His father gave up crofting and accepted the job as the woodsman on the Keith Hall estate. And here are two depictions of it. And this had been designed in the 1790s by Thomas White. And this is where Robert Marnock basically grew up and trained as a gardener. Then there's an enormous gap. We know that he trained age 16, and then the next time we meet him, he was 29, and he'd accepted a job with Diana Beaumont at Bretton Hall, now Yorkshire Sculpture Park. And she was one of the most fanatic horticulturists in the country, and he worked for her. Initially in the kitchen garden, where he lived in the bothy. This is the bothy at the top of the kitchen garden. The kitchen garden is no longer a kitchen garden, but it's now part of the exhibition space for the sculpture park. But the bothy is still there, and it had at the time the biggest greenhouse in the world. Yeah, so this was the one designed and built by Bailey in Holborn in London. So, and he came to prominence through this man, John Floris Loudon, another Ladopath. He had had a little bit more education. He had had the luck of being able to attend the University of Edinburgh as a 15-year-old to 16-year-old. So, then they all went over to England and tried to make their way in the world. And Loudon did so in agriculture initially, then switching over to sort of the concerns for the lower classes, the disadvantaged in society, and looking at the workers. And in this case, you know, this famous plan of his Hints for Breathing Places for the metropolis is there to encourage airflow and healthy environments where everyone can go and live and work in a healthy environment. Because the greatest problem at the time, of course, was the smog and the density of the city. Well, Loudon was the person who adjudicated in a competition for the Sheffield Botanic Gardens, and a design by Robert Marnock, age 34, was selected. And not just that, he then applied for the position of curator, which he got as well. So he was basically able to design, he did the design and he implemented his own design, which is an ideal sort of situation, something like that. Yeah, that doesn't happen very often. And he was able to run this place according to what he thought. And instead of designing it as a typical botanical garden with order beds, it was designed as a landscape garden. Yeah, or not that he called it a landscape garden. It was a natural garden. So informal lines, and there was space for community events, community activities, and that is what this garden was sort of set up to do. So horticultural events, exhibitions, and getting everyone in. It was called a public garden, but it was a subscription garden. So you had to be a subscriber in order to get entry, or you had to come on Wednesday afternoons, which wasn't possible for most. So another opportunity arose with the design in the same year for the General Cemetery. This had been won by an architect, but there needed to be some landscape input. So Marnock came and designed this landscape, and this was the landscape drawn or painted as it was completed in 1834. So this was there as a bit of propaganda for, and this wasn't supposed to be a cemetery that was open all the time, well, during daylight hours. Let's keep it polite. Daylight hours, everything was open to anyone. So that was weekdays and weekends. And that is how it started for the first 5 years, until it became so popular that grieving and youngsters no longer went together, yeah, because the whole youth of Sheffield was hanging out in these gardens, yeah, and they were up to no good, you know what it is like. We talked about drugs this morning, so but it was designed as a park, yeah. So and the intention was that after burial had been completed, this would be returned into a park for the people. That's a different story, but. So Marnock arrived in Sheffield in 1834. This guy, James Stuart Buckingham, had just been elected as the MP. And James Stuart Buckingham was the person who had set up a newspaper in India and the only newspaper in India which was very critical of what the British Army was doing. And as a result, the British Army took it upon themselves to shut the newspaper. But he was angry, and very angry, and pursued this. And after 4 years, he was given a pension for life. But at stage he was back in England because he had to go through the courts. And he wanted to improve the lot of the working classes. And he was a teetotaler, and he sort of promoted, this in Sheffield. Didn't go down too well, did some, They liked their drink at lunchtime. But in general, he was a great success. And one of the first things he promoted was the Select Committee on Public Walks, which we know through Edmund Chadwick, who wrote the ultimate report. But it was Chadwick, Buckingham, who was behind it. And Buckingham was also the author of this ideal city, national in a book called National Evils and Practical Remedies. Yeah. And cities ought to be situated within a green environment. They ought to be neighborly. There ought to be communal spaces. And, there's a focus here, which is very much visible on this plan for Victoria, as the city was called. And this was actually realized in the United States. In fact, in several versions. This was also the model that was taken by the Garden City movement for their sort of ideas. But it wasn't a new idea then. I'm sorry, it's rather cut off. This is New Lanark, Robert Owen, 1800. Yeah, and this was sort of the utopian socialism, the so-called industrial community that was a concept. And the community was meant to be held together by the arrangement of the buildings, and the fact that the open space is all sort of focused onto each other. But it was also there because the provisions were there for a network of walks, as well as a community garden. And these are the walks. But there was also a community garden, as it was called. And, these were the great models of the era. And they were picked up and realized in various places in the United States. And we find a lot of places like New Harmony and Victoria, and these are all sort of reference to these ideal communities, these concepts. So, and here you see sort of a landscape contact with everything, the communal facilities all in the center of the community. And these are here to see the gardens. So other architects jumped in the bandwagon as well. Here we got Hygeia, Hygienic, that's a nice one, by Papworth, another landscape architect, landscape gardener and architect. So all these sort of classical geometrical models, which were intended as schematic principles. So Marnock arrived in London, and in an era when it was the density was reaching desperate proportions in 1840, and it expanded. This is obviously a slightly later development, but it very much indicates sort of the conditions of the working classes. And Marnock, and the other thing what was happening is, of course, we had the traditional model had been new developments with squares, rectangular road patterns with squares in the middle. These squares were communal, with access with a key. I'm not going to dwell on that, but with Russell Square on that. Yeah, so that was the model. Another model was for the new park. What was a new park going to be? And it was experimented with from about 1800 with Regent's Park, with a number of concepts. And I've got two here, which shows you the ideas that were sort of emerging. And the idea was, this was a royal park. It had been a royal park for 300 years. And it was turned into, Prince Regent thought he was going to turn this into housing development. How do you do that? And how do you do that in a fashionable manner? So the initial idea was to have villas set in a picturesque landscape. And here these blocks are all sort of villas. Yeah. So this was not intended as a public park, which is what it became after 1842. So these ideas evolved, and there were lots of protests against the idea of developing it. So in the end, only houses around the inner circle, and this is the area which Marnock was connected with, were realized. And, of course, the terraces all the way around it. That was done by John Nash, but the main designer for this was, when he started, a 16-year-old boy called Decimus Burton, who was the son of a developer. And he designed these terraces, age 16. Yeah, we haven't got many students who can do that. Yeah, and they're still standing. That's the remarkable thing. If a 16-year-old can do it, what happened to us? Yeah. Anyway, so the idea was that these terraces would be in a picturesque landscape at a moment that connection has been rather cut off, because in the late 20th century we have developed a hedge and an edge, which shouldn't be there, but that's a different story. And yeah, these terraces, they were supposed to sit around that landscape as part of it. Well, in the center of it, and I pointed it out to you in the middle, there was the Royal Botanical Society's garden. I'm not going to dwell on that either, but Marnock did the design together with Decimus Burton. And this became the focus of the community, as it was called. And that community consisted out of different parts. It was again a landscape garden, naturalistic, flowing lines, and connected with the park as part of it. And yeah, so we've got that. But again, he made it the center point of community. He created a new community of lovers of plants, and they were all the sort of the hoi polloi, the upper classes initially, and then so these exhibition or the openings for the flower exhibitions and flower festivals, they were also 3 days. First day the royals, in the afternoons and the evening the upper classes, and then the next days the sort of the rest of the population. So divided and yet united, all being able to see the same plants. So and this became a great success, so much so that it took away the business from what was then the Horticultural Society of London. Yeah, they lost their clientele, and that caused a bit of aggro. In the meanwhile, this youngster, Richard, and Decimus Burton, Decimus Burton helped his father in development, but also accepted some of his own. And Calverley Park in Tunbridge Wells was one of the first sort of suburban developments outside London. And it was a series of houses set in a picturesque landscape, as shown there. And he helped his father at St. Leonard's by the Sea, where we similarly trying to make a focus. This is all the era before we had been able to realize any public parks. You know, the only parks that were open to the public were the royal parks. And it doesn't really start until Victoria Park, so 1840, that we get real public parks. So that before that time, how do you realize a park that is open to a community? You make it a subscription garden, as in this case. This is in St. Leonard's on Stee. This is a Decimus Burton design. So Decimus Burton was also able to do his own designs. This is his Calverley Park in Tunbridge Wells on a sloping side, consisting of series of villas, but a gated community, gatehouse, gate, and you were able to get through on foot, but not if you, not otherwise if you had no business. And it survives as of today. So back to London, and London, Regent's Park was just a mere part of a much larger scheme that was to connect the Carlton House, the Prince Regent's Palace, and the initial idea had been sort of a rectilinear set of roads that became a curvaceous one, picturesque. And yeah, so here we got that with an arcade all the way along. It's just later demolished because the naughty ladies hanging about. And so, oh yeah, what I needed to say there is note no trees. Yeah, so that urban section that was all sort of, well, so the trees came in on the edges, and in this case on Park Village East and Park Village West, which were sort of designed as little communities where there were shared facilities and where the boundaries of the properties weren't supposed to be seen. This is Park Village West, and this is Park Village East. Park Village East has the half of it has been eaten by development, but this was taken last week, and we've got these buildings here. But this was all sort of supposed to be a green road. Yeah. Well, Marnock had started his career in Sheffield and was involved with this guy, George Wostenhall, who, like Marnock, had come from a disadvantaged background and wanted something better for everyone. And he wanted to turn Sheffield into a new Manchester, better than Manchester. And so he had this house built, and this house was built next to the stone quarry with the best quality stone, and he built it in limestone, which had to come 17 miles away. So that tells you something about him. But he was interested in new development. And one of the first places he tackled was Ranmore in Sheffield, which was brought together in an consortium and where they were going to create a new community which represented all sections of society. Not just Church of England, which is what was happening at the time. So, and particularly because a lot of the wealth was held by those from other religions, and it was a big fight at the time. And you see all these curved roads, yeah, they're all there and going with the contours. And those are all roads designed by Robert Marnock in order to sort of create, yeah, these wide avenues and these gardens full of trees and shrubs, creating a new community in the center. Yeah, in the center here, where there were pub and shopping facilities and a church, you know, that is all sort of together. So then Woestenholm couldn't quite realize everything he wanted, and he said, okay, I'm going to create my own community. He bought an additional bit of land, and that became his house. And then you were able to buy plots. So you can see sort of the relationship between the picturesque movement, which I just pointed out to you, Regent's Park and Burton's designs, coming back here. And, you know, and he planted lime trees. These lime trees were planted slightly later, after Woestenholm had traveled to the United States and Europe. And he said, that's what I want too. And they form a very important part of that sort of design. Yeah. And again, this was taken this last week. So that was, and these houses were intended for the new wealthy classes. You know, the house had to be, he created a community with houses because they had to have a certain value. So you were allowed to build your own, but you had to comply with some rules, which said a stone facade, sash windows, dwarf stone wall at the front, and specify. And Robert Marnock designed your garden. That was the condition. Yeah, so he designed all the gardens in the neighborhood. Yeah, and the remarkable thing is that they've never all been paved over. You know, there's never become an area without. So the next area alongside this was set aside for the aspiring working classes who were on the way up. And we have these freehold land societies, you know, which started in 1832. These enabled groups of working men to come together and build a property, and it was encouraged in order to get the voting rights. Yeah. So that in order to have voting rights, your house had to have a certain value. So that was what Woestenholm was after. He was trying to, yeah, change the nature of the electoral community. And again, that became a good success. Marnock designed the whole layout, and to do it as cheaply as possible. These are all straight roads. But what he did do is he carefully preserved all the ancient oaks which were on this slope. And so Oak Hill Road, you know, they all denoted the names of the roads. They have now gone, but they were all sort of part of that particular area. And all these guys, they worked together. They colluded in order to sort of get this. Yeah? So it was forcing a new community. And it was successful. Well, then, so Marnock was also involved in Ladbroke Grove in Notting Hill, where there had been, and where one is always told that it was done by Thomas Ellison, which was all an area that used to be a horse racing ground, and which was this became went bust in the 1840s, and Thomas Ellison produced a plan, architect produced a plan, and then I also found a plan by James Thompson, an architect, but there are so many James Thompsons that I don't know which one it is. So no dates. That is very much, it's sort of similar to what was executed, but it was twisted by Marnock. So as opposed to that straight layout, he created a series of communal gardens at the back of the detached and the terraces. So these are all communal gardens which are accessible not from the front, but from the back. And in order to organize that, they suggested to have gardens committees. Yeah, and these gardens committees are fantastic because they keep minutes. Yeah. And so we know quite a bit about them, but we still need a student to go do it all. So any volunteers, come and see me afterwards. Yeah, so here we are. These are the detached houses, detached villas, gardens opening onto the communal garden, which was there laid out. So, and the best stories which I've read in publications are those during the Second World War and after of the nannies who used to go there to gossip. And hide among the bushes and have little joint parties. And there are also accounts of the families walking there and playing. So, and this has multifunctional space, you might say. And and this whole area is still, it is now, over the last sort of 30 years, it's become highly desirable. It was always sort of desirable, but when I saw it first 40 years ago, it was sort of a little bit decrepit. And there were ideas to redevelop the area, and that was fortunately sort of stopped. Here you see some of the looking into the communal garden at the back. We're going to go into it now. Yeah, so this is from within the communal garden into the private gardens. Yeah, but these gardens weren't supposed to be separated by hedges, but they sort of crept in over time. They were supposed to be with shrubs, but I like it actually. And here's a view from the first floor, looking down, and this is the private garden and into the communal garden. So this is sort of trying to experiment with a new typology. Yeah, and Marnock, his whole life, he looked for new ways, new typologies, new ways of developing. So here are these various communal gardens. So his first house, which he bought here not his first house, but the house where he lived for 27 years, was this one, and it was in St. John's Wood. And St. John's Wood was the first suburb of London, to the north of Regent's Park. This was his house. Yeah? He was a very successful gardener. Yeah, I'm not going to take you through the houses he lived in because it would make you envy him. But I'm going to show you his final address, which was one of the first mansion houses in London, where he bought flat number 1. Yeah, a 2-story flat within this mansion block on the right-hand side at the back, and moved in before anyone else and lived there until he died. Yeah, so and again, this hadn't been trialed before because apartment blocks were really there for poor people. We packed as many in as possible, and apartments for the rich outside Regent's Park. You know, they were rare, and this was one of the first. So, and he lived amongst the upper middle class, as it was termed by the sort of the contemporary reviews. Yeah. Large flats, substantial leases, and they have porters. Not bad for a leather pads. Yeah. So community. Yeah. So he's been addressing. You know, as in the 19th century, you didn't really have everyone included in one. We kept them separate, and that was, that was the gist. But you provided for all, and you did as much as you could. And the whole way in which he provided his green spaces and later his public parks as well, sort of identifies him as one of these sort of the 19th century reformers. And community spirited man. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. So I hope you have some questions for Jan. Hands up, please. Yes.
Sylvie Tully lived in.
Yeah.
Oh, well, did that influence her design?
Well, it's difficult not to be influenced by it, is it? Yeah, I mean, one could write an essay on that and sort of make a case. Yeah, why not?
How did you go? Oh, hold on.
Yeah, how was that? It's been like,
Right, did you go to Southwark? I think only once. One right, okay. It's on the ground,
basement, yeah. Basement, yes.
In that block?
No.
No, in the St. John's Wood one.
No,
In Ladbroke Grove.
Yeah.
I thought they were fantastic. When I first went to the guy, I thought that should be an alien and inalienable right for everybody to have, every family to have that access to open space from your own little garden. I mean, that's the span to that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then go on to a no road. I mean, that was so different, so lovely about that lot. Like most distinct from Square 3, you have to cross the road to get to the garden. Not now, anyway.
Just following on from that, have you ever seen him doing any social housing or anything in that level, or he always went for the expensive clients?
Well, this scheme here, which I showed you in Sheffield, this Land Society, the Montgomery Land Society.
Okay, so
that's for working men.
Okay, that was.
Yeah, that was for aspiring working men.
But then later on, he went more. I don't know.
Well, no, he did everything, you know, whatever he could get his hands on, you know, from estate gardens to those, for the working man.
Okay, right. There were some hands here. Yes.
Right, so I just noticed someone of the society had on the wall about the land, the lease of land society had allotment lists as well, 54 allotments, which gets really fascinating if you've got, as Annabel's just said, about having a private small space, and then you move out into a communal landscape with activities as well as leisure, and admiring things for what they are. But to actually go into a garden sometimes on places to do things that are productive or interesting. It's very interesting. So early.
It is. It was there right from the beginning of the 19th century. As I showed you in these ideal schemes, and I think someone like Sir Buckingham, it needs a proper monograph as well. Sort of to show his contribution to this particular, because that really encouraged these land societies as well. It was all sort of little bits. You can't say who was responsible, but it all helped to change the mindset and to open up for new ways of doing things.
I looked at this to Robert Marnock down in Berkshire, and one of the sites was an asylum.
Yeah.
Which you might be familiar with.
Mile. Yeah.
Was Helen one of the first sort of pioneers in creating landscapes that the inmates could actually contribute to looking after and they start getting therapy working?
Well, there was this wave of building asylums, which and Marnock was one of the landscape gardeners who did Fairmile, and there it was about providing activities, and this came already with the notion, what you said this morning, you know, that being outside is healthy, doing activities is health making, and being outside and working together is good for you, and that was all known, you know. And here we are, 200 years later, and we're still inventing it, you know. With new research, yeah, it's just shown, yeah. We've known it for 300 years, yes. Yeah.
Right, Robert.
Just quick, what happens at the back of Oxford and Cambridge functions? What's the aspect at the rear of the house?
And this, he had the best. So this is this slightly southeast facing this wing.
At the front, but what happens at the back?
There is a courtyard.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to get entry into it, and yeah. So
aerial image.
I suppose I can now go to Google Earth. I haven't tried that yet. So yeah.
So, any other questions? Yes, please. And could we ask for switch over of the talk? Sorry, please. Yes, please. Over to you.
The Ladbroke Grove Gardens, didn't the householders pay gardeners to maintain them? Presumably didn't maintain them themselves.
They had a gardens committee which decided what needed to be done, and the gardens committee employed the gardener or gardeners.
So they must have paid some sums.
Yeah, there were annual fees involved.
Yeah.
I think it's still like that.
Yeah.
Very close connected to.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent, and that's also remarkable. They managed to set up things that have survived. Yeah. So have been sustainable, you know.
I think it's
Sustainable, new word.
I hear there's many politics involved.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is,
Of course.
all of them are
Of
successful.
course, you know. I mean, and that is with everything. You know, you need to. I mean, things change over time, and you need to negotiate. You need to, And there's the periods where things go wrong, and then things are repaired or reinvented.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the Victorian parks like Birkenhead Park. Because what was the date of Birkenhead Park?
1842.
Yeah, so these people, do you think they've all been talking to one another? And then you've got the Mawsons with the Victorian parks.
Yeah,
You know,
Mawson was much later, but
Yeah.
Paxton was a contemporary of Robert Marnock.
Mm.
Paxton approved the design for the Sheffield Botanic Garden, and then they became sort of competitors because Paxton went with the Horticultural Society of London, and Marnock went with the Royal Botanical Society's garden in Regent's Park, which took over to the clientele.
Mm.
Yeah, and Paxton was at the RHS Gardens, what became the RHS Gardens in Chiswick, Duke of Devonshire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, was the head gardener at Chatsworth. Yeah, and Marnock was sort of a competitor, and Marnock had a much more genteel sort of demeanor, and Paxton was a little aggressive. Yeah, little man. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jan. Really,
Okay.
Can I introduce our next speaker, Helen John, and you'll be talking about the many lives of Crossbone Graveyard and Garden of Remembrance and intergenerational legacy. And Helen is a chartered member of the Landscape Institute since 2015. She's been employed at the Bankside Open Spaces Trust between 2010 and 2016 before becoming a consultant and broadening the scope of her work. With community building and grassroots design at its core, her company Bankside Open Spaces Trust remains one of her favorite clients. So we're trying to set it all up with technology and recording.
Do some work.
Yeah, looks good.
So are you recording?
Yes, it's all recorded.
Lovely. Thank you. Over to Helen.
Thank you, Rach, for having me today. Thank you, Robert, for inviting me. So my name is Helen John, and as Carolin said, I'll be talking about Crossbones Graveyard and Garden of Remembrance. I've said that first bit to check you guys at the back can hear me.
Absolutely.
Excellent, good. So there has been a lot of literature written about Crossbones Graveyard. Quite a recent one was the one in 2016 by Professor Sandra Hausner, where she says the capacity to mobilise us in the present for the health of the contemporary world is the reason for telling this tale. So it being a graveyard, of course, a lot of it focuses on the past, sometimes the very distant past, but at Crossbones we try and remember those people and learn from their legacy. Quick introduction to Bankside Open Spaces Trust. It was established back in about 2000, and Leah, where are you, Leah? We just had a quick catch up there. Leah was actually involved right at the beginning. We're a registered charity run by a board of trustees, and we've got a staff team. BOSS actually came about through a collaboration between Southwark Council and a resident forum, and they were concerned about the pace of development in SE1 and the fact that many open spaces were being lost to development, either directly by development encroachment or via overshadowing. And as we know, that's an ongoing issue in our urban centres, with a lot of our community areas and public parks becoming overshadowed. So our aim is to improve the area within SE1, making it greener and a more beautiful place to live and work. We've helped create 45 individual parks and gardens. Sometimes it's been very much from scratch. So we've worked with various housing associations, 10 resident associations and TMOs to establish food grown spaces. But we've also tried to establish, re-establish old spaces like Red Cross Garden, which I'll mention in a moment, and of course Crossbones Graveyard. We've won several awards, including the UNESCO Man and Biosphere Award, and we've more recently won the Golden Pineapple Award for Marlborough Sports Garden, and there's quite a bit of that on the internet as well, so I'll touch on that in a bit. So how we do it? So we like to think of Octavia Hill as our patron saint. She was very much, as you know, about creating open air living rooms for urban population, really basing a lot of her designs and her aspirations on her own childhood in Surrey. And so we've continued to engage with the community like she did to try and make community-led spaces. And how we do this is through regular gardening groups, volunteer wardening, such as at Crossbones. We basically couldn't open Crossbones Graveyard unless we had our volunteer warden team. We also support steering groups, organise public events. We put together educational projects. And our partners include London boroughs of Southwark and Lambeth, lots of other charities, other health organisations. Leah pointed out earlier the importance of going cross-sector these days to try and get more projects with more outreach. And just recently, we've also got a new partner in the Mexican Embassy, which features later on, random, but it does make sense. So Red Cross Garden, a lot of you be familiar with it. So we're standing under the pergola here. We're actually looking towards the Shard, and you could probably log a brick if you were really, really strong into Crossbones Graveyard here. So if you're facing towards the Shard, this would have originally been a block of tenement slums. So you've had multiple families living in rooms. And this is why Octavia Hill chose this particular site, because she was trying to save the local population from this kind of standard of living and create this wonderful living outdoor living room. We also have a 999-year lease of Waterloo Green. So Boss, wherever it can, will try and secure a long-term lease of its spaces, long-term being 25 or 30 years or more. We were very fortunate to actually inherit this from the Waterloo Millennium Green Trust, which sadly failed. And we've got a huge number of people that use this every year. The Diversity Garden at the other end of the spectrum, this is again a relatively recent development. We were working with, I can't remember which housing association it was now, but working with them to develop this garden. And the Marlborough Sports Garden, which I mentioned earlier. This is a sneak preview. I was going to say don't share it, but this is being recorded, hey ho. So we've got here a sand court, which is currently in operation, the Muga, which is currently in operation. But everything else, the community hub, etc., that you see, we're building on circular economy principles. It forms a case study for the zero avoidable plastics project, which seeks to eliminate plastics from construction. So it's a really exciting project. So do keep an eye on that one. The Tate Modern Community Garden, which a few of you have asked me about earlier, and I can't remember the password, sorry, but you can ask Boss for it if you want to gain access. Mint Street Park. Now, Mint Street Park, Red Cross and Crossbones to us form a sort of a trio for the community. So Mint Street Park is actually built on the site of the Mint Street Hospital. So a lot of local people in times past would have been born here. They'd have lived on Red Cross Way, and when they died, if they didn't have a penny to their name, they would have ended up in the Paupers burial ground at Crossbones, which is literally 100 metres up the road. And this is Crossbones Graveyard. I'll talk a little bit more about this amazing structure later on. So just to picture where we are, this is obviously Roke's map from 1746, and we've got the River Thames at the top there, and this is Red Cross Way. It's a road where local policemen feared to tread. Basically, they wouldn't go down there unless they were in a pair, and sometimes not even then. So, talking about its history, so it's thought it was established in the medieval period, and as you know, at that time, this is just down the road from the Globe, it was very much the gentleman's playground. So at the end of a working day in the city, they'd cross over the bridge, and then it was just a free-for-all. You could go and find a prostitute, you could go bear baiting, go to the theatre, basically just let your hair down. Now, the Bishop of Winchester owned a plot of land right by the Thames here, and his brothels were then known as stews, and these women would work under licence from the Bishop of Winchester, and thereby went by the name of Winchester geese. Nice chat with Bishop of Winchester, because he used to make obviously a lot of money out of taxing sex work, and at the end of their life they actually weren't allowed then a Christian burial. Nice. So they then had to be buried in unconsecrated land. There's some debate as to whether Crossbones was unconsecrated or not, but since then we've sort of changed that, and I'll tell you about that later. In the Victorian period, Crossbones was known as the Paupers Burial Ground on Red Cross Street. It was also known as the Single Women's Burial Ground, another word for the sex workers' burial ground. But in fact, 60% of the burials there are children under the age of 8. By 1853, Crossbones was completely overcharged with dead. That literally meant that there was a stench along the Red Cross Way. They simply couldn't pack more bodies into the ground. In 1883, it was sold as a building site, and Lord Brabazon wrote at the time, with a view to save this ground from such desecration and to retain it as an open space for the use and enjoyment of the people. The sale was therefore declared null and void under the Disused Burial Grounds Act. So, round of applause to Lord Brabazon, and the fight then continued to save it. In the 1990s, Transport for London, what's that network? Well, they bought up the site because they needed to build the Jubilee Line substation, which of course you can see it's the brick building on your right as you go in.
Now, Mola removed about 148 skeletons as part of building the foundations for that, and it later featured in the Mola's exhibition of London bodies, and it contained, one of them was a young woman's syphilitic skull with multiple erosive lesions. So this is a picture from Mola. As you can see, all the bones here are disarticulated. It's a bit of a fuzzy image, but there's actually very, very little soil there. And I imagine that soil, if it is there, didn't actually come from leaves, if you know what I mean. So what was happening throughout the life of the burial ground was, in order to create more space, they were having to remove bodies, which I've been told by Lucy Coleman Talbot, who's pretty much the world's expert on Crossbones Garden. They would tend to remove burials from the northwest corner, because this was traditionally across the whole of the UK, the area of a graveyard which was reserved for the Irish and suicides, so victims of suicide. So they tend to be targeted for removal. The other thing they did was they would break up the bones with a sledgehammer to create more space. And so eventually you ended up with a very compacted layer of bones. And this is what we found as well when we went onto site. At the end of the burial, what the Victorians then did was they poured lime mortar concrete over the whole thing in order to disinfect it and cap in those burials. So pretty rough and ready. I'm going to give you a couple of stories of the people that are buried there, bringing it back to the human level. These people, although it was a pauper's burial ground, these people were really loved. And that's so important to remember, because I think this is one of the reasons why Crossbones has endured. It's been threatened with the development over the years, but it's somehow endured. And that's because of the place it holds in the community. So this lady is I told you about the body earlier that was discovered near the surface. Underneath the Jubilee Line substation, well, before it was built. This particular story featured in BBC History Cold Cases. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt, because it was televised. So obviously they have to sort of make a few jumps to give a name to the story. But she was buried less than 1 metre from the surface. When they found her, they thought she was probably about 27, 28 years old, because her bones were in such poor condition that it revealed she must have had tertiary stage syphilis, which takes about 10 years to develop. But actually, they found that when in close investigation, her bones hadn't fused, which meant that she was probably prostituted from the age of 7 or 9. Now, the reason I mention that is because Crossbones is really important in providing a platform for modern day issues. So it allows people to talk about sexual disease. For example, we've had people coming over, the medical teams from Guy's Hospital, to have tours of the site. We've had people coming here who choose to work in the sex work industry, and they're proud to be sex workers. We also have some people that have visited the site that have been trafficked into sex work or had to do it for financial reasons. And obviously, we know that in certain parts of the world, people think if they sleep with a virgin, they will be cured of disease. And this is very likely what was happening in Victorian London at the time. In fact, 1 in 5 people were probably engaged in some sort of sex work in order to put bread on the table. But she was loved. And the reason we know this is because there are very high concentrations of mercury in her bones, which meant that somebody was paying an awful lot of money to give her what was then thought to be the cure for syphilis. Obviously, it killed you in other ways. She didn't die of syphilis, she actually died of pneumonia, but of course, having syphilis would have lowered her immune system. Another story is Andrew Whitson. He stood just 71 centimetres high. He was absolutely tiny, and he was often seen crossing London Bridge on a little cart, which was about so big, because he was paraplegic, and he would propel himself with 2 sticks. When he died, because he was in debt, his landlord and landlady tried to take his body and sell it to the local Rise Hospital. And in fact, Crossbones graveyard, as you can imagine, was rife when it came to graveyard robbery. Guys and St Thomas's offered somewhere between £100 and £250 for his body. So his friends, remember we're talking about how much these people were loved, his friends barricaded themselves into the room with his body to protect it. And he was then later buried under several coffins. So somebody could have flogged his body, but somehow somebody made sure that they didn't. And you imagine £250 back then was a huge sum of money. This is where the story takes a slightly different turn. This is John Constable, who used to live locally. He's now moved to Glastonbury. But the story goes that late one night on the 23rd of November, he was compelled to walk the streets of London, and he could sense the presence of a woman. It wasn't Katie, his partner. And he came across this, then no ribbons, nothing, this strange enclosed space. And he did some research on it later on. Throughout this walk, he kept hearing the voice of a woman who kept calling herself the Winchester Goose. He did the research, and since that night, he has campaigned to create a long-term garden of remembrance for what is now known as the outcast dead, so the people that were forgotten. And on the 23rd of every single month now at 7 p.m, there's a vigil held outside the gates. So these gates are sort of a portal into the garden, and more ribbons are added to that space to remember not only the people then, the outcast dead, but to remember loved ones now. So Crossbones, the community. So as I say, John Constable was trying to get this long-term garden of remembrance, but because they weren't a constituted group, they were struggling. So they approached Bankside Open Spaces Trust and said, we're not making any headway with Transport for London. Will you please help us? So we got our foot in the door with an interim 3-year lease just to really prove that we were able to manage this space. And it was the first step in creating this publicly accessible garden, to finally allow those berries here the peace they didn't have in life. But remember, this is only an interim 3-year lease, and we know that the graveyard has previously been threatened with development. So we have a lease, we have a site. I go on site. First of all, you can't get on there. There's an accessibility issue. You're having to scramble into the garden to get inside. When we go on site, we find human bones, not a huge number, but they're definitely human bones scattered on the surface. There had previously been a garden there, a very informal garden that was created by somebody called the Invisible Gardener, and he acted as an informal security guard for TfL. But although we tried really hard to engage with him, you can imagine how torn he was in having a space that he was able to allow some access to, and then Boss coming on board and saying, well, we want to open this up to the public now. So unfortunately, a lot of that, and we respect him for it, but a lot of that material did get taken away. A lot of the other topiaries that he's made did get taken off site. So we came on site, and the first thing we had to do is bury these bones. We had to apply to the Ministry of Justice to do so. We had a very emotional day of collecting all these human remains and making a cairn in the middle of the garden. And then came the hard graft. I was literally going around and knocking on site foremen's doors and saying, hey, have you got a spare 60 tons of type MOT1, please? And they would just rock up. And so what we did was we covered the human remains with soil. Then we had to create a buffer layer out of orange membrane and gravel and more soil to gradually build up, because of course we couldn't dig down because the burials are so shallow, to gradually build up and create a safe garden environment which our volunteers could also garden in. So that's what we were met with when we went on site. It was actually steeper than it looks. This is Arthur de Mowbray, and I guess you could say that Crossbones Garden is possibly one of the most circular economy compliant gardens you could ever go to. This, if you see these crossbars here on the structure, they're actually made of buddleia from the site. We had to clear some of the buddleia off the site, but nothing got thrown away. We kept everything within the garden. This is the cairn that we built with the human remains underneath. We built a wildlife garden trying to incorporate the existing goat willow that was on site. And this is John Holt from the London School of Dry Stone Walling. We must have worked with about 150, 200 volunteers, often local businesses, to create a series of dry stone wall beds, because obviously it was an interim garden space, so we needed to be able to move these beds around if needed. And we created these beautiful beds that you still see there today. So, key to the future of Crossbones is that it becomes a strong and visible thread woven into the fabric of SE1. So we want to really continue Lord Brabazon's work. And we need to build the Crossbones community. We need to own the narrative rather than a developer owning the narrative. We need to animate the site in order to encourage wider involvement and more ideas. And we need to educate. And importantly, when we were negotiating for a longer lease, we managed to get a lease which was protected under the Land Bond and Tenant Act 1954. So if you're not in property law, that basically means we have an automatic right to renewal as soon as the lease comes to an end. Now, I haven't so far talked about this. This is, and because this is being recorded and I'm worried that Lucy Coleman-Talbot will be listening to it later, I've got to be careful to get my wording right. So a material culture is the physical objects created by a culture. This includes buildings, tools, other artifacts created by the member of a society, and they are essential to that culture, not just a product of it. Objects receive their modes of agency through humans' interaction with it, transforming the object from more than just an object, but a meaning, a symbol, a source of power. Now, that is so important in the Crossbones narrative. When we applied for planning permission originally, we were changing it from derelict land to a private garden with supervised access to the public. But actually, although that was a bit difficult, challenging for Boss at the beginning to try and find enough volunteers to open the space, actually, we found that that material culture needs to be protected. If you open this site 24/7, you're going to find that there will be some aspects of vandalism or damage that will occur. So actually having those volunteer wardens on site is really important for the future of the site as well. This is some of our material culture. They do not have to be things that we think of, each individual might think of it as intrinsically beautiful. This was a shrine that appeared for all suicides. Very spontaneously, somebody came on site, wanted to remember a loved one, and gradually this little shrine has built and built and built. A much more sort of formal shrine, if you like, are these Mizuko Jitsu statues. So in the very Crossbones way, it's strange the way things cross over. I had a couple of parents approach me within a sort of 2 or 3 week period who'd lost babies, either in utero or during childbirth. And they said, there is nowhere within our culture that we can talk about this. And as we know, many women end up aborting babies earlier. And there's a sort of a shame around it. We can't talk about it. Miscarriages is seen to be, a taboo really in our culture. So they asked us to create some statues on site, rather like they have in Japan. So we worked with a local stone carver just down the road, and we created these beautiful little Mizuko Jitsu statues. And people bring things along, buttons, little ribbons, bonnets, that they can give to the statue that they weren't able to give to their child. This is one of the events that we have every year. It's the act of regret, remembrance and restoration, where we have the Dean of Southwark come and bless the garden. So although it's perhaps officially not consecrated ground, it is blessed every single year in this act. We also have quite a bit of pagan interest in the site. This is one of the events that's held every year by the Lions Part. And we are now gradually introducing children to the space as well. And here we were visited by some school children. This is Nick, one of our volunteer wardens, posing with two Dickensian characters. This here is from Lucy Coleman's Talbot's We Are Here exhibition, where we recreated what the coffins would have looked like that the people on site would have been buried with. And then we had little things to symbolise their life on each one of the coffins. And this is yours truly, dressed up as La Catrina. And this is the Mexican ambassador who donated La Catrina, who's kind of the twin of the original Madonna, which is on site. And here we are, as I said before, nothing gets wasted at Crossbones. If it comes onto site, it stays on site. So with the We Are Here exhibition, we turned all those coffins into bug hotels. Composting is really important on site because the community very much believes that anything that comes up from the ground has the DNA of the people that are buried there. Therefore, nothing should be removed from site. Enough of that went on in the past. We now want to make sure that it stays there. So the Crossbones vision, and this is where it gets tricky, in that interim space, there was a huge amount of freedom in grassroots design. So when Crossbones has always been part of a much larger parcel of development land. So in effect, when TfL agreed to have us use Crossbones, they said, but this to us, not in so many words, but in effect, it became a bargaining chip. So they said, if you give us permission to develop the site to the north of Crossbones, we'll let you, Southwark, have this as a long-term public open space. You can see the politics and how messy this now gets. So what we had to do is say, okay, that's fine, but please let the community design this place, because the community understand all the items on site, they understand the stories, they want to be able to control the narrative. So the challenges, building community trust was the first thing. It was not easy at some of our meetings for the community, particularly friends of Crossbones, to understand that we were trying to help, we were trying to build on what had gone on before. Also defining community. So we were presented with friends of Crossbones, of course, came to us first, but then it soon became clear after just a couple of years, suddenly that Crossbones community has grown. So you have to redefine it. Nobody can say, it should be my decision. I am the community. We had to go out there and recognise that there are now other members of that community. We had to identify the stakeholders, as said before, try and get that access and occupation of the site. We had to try and find funding and contributions. We managed to build the first Crossbones with just 20 grand and a lot of pro bono help and contributions. Then we had to try and secure that long-term lease, knowing that it's part of a bigger bargaining chip in a bigger development. And then to work to manage and maintain the site, and as I said before, make it thrive and weave it into the fabric of the local area. So how do we take this and make it work with this? So you've got the community elements and you've got the corporate element. And there's always going to be a bit of a disconnect there. And that's why we felt it was so important to already have that Crossbones vision before any new development partner came on board, because we were worried otherwise there'd be that classic top-down approach to building this garden instead of bottom-up. I've included this picture here because you may have heard about the mosaic in London. It's been a huge, if you haven't heard about this, it's Liberty of Southwark site, it's worth looking at. The Museum of London found some incredible artefacts on site, but there was a little bit of pushback from Crossbones because they were saying, why is it that Roman remains are seen as more important than Victorian or even modern items? And that's interesting, isn't it? This is our Crossbones vision as currently stands. So this is making its way gradually now into stage 4 designs for landscape architects out there. So we're getting to the point where we're starting to put some technical detail on this. So to conclude, its protection is multi-layered by its profile and its place in the consciousness of the people who value it, the local people right now. It's linked with the past, what's happening now, and what we want to achieve for future communities. It's planning designation, that it will soon become a public open space, and property law, so protecting it to ensure that even if the political climate changes, that we still ensure there's that long-term protection for the site. And all of these help to secure its future. And that is the end. Thank you.
So, what's it for?
I think we're all reevaluating what happens when we're not here anymore. So, yeah, any questions really? Goodness me. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, this is more to you, Carolin. I was just thinking, given the sort of value of public open space in urban areas, and the value was recognised, not surprisingly, during COVID, you know, because people value open space on the doorstep. What's the Landscape Institute's position on the selling off of and the development of public open space in urban areas?
Gosh, that's throwing you in the deep end, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously, you know, as you know, we are not necessarily involved in direct management of land and that sort of thing. So I think there are lots of different advice going around, and people have. I don't think the Institute has a direct position necessarily on that. You know, you have other organizations like the Open Spaces Society and lots of other people who, you know, organizations who are more involved in exact management of pieces of land in that sense. But I think, you know, you probably all know that, you know, we've been working on green infrastructure and the value of green infrastructure, which written papers around COVID and these sort of things. So we work on a different level, I guess, more on the sort of policy level and influencing government on a sort of larger scale.
Yeah, I suppose it's just I'm aware that, you know, a few years ago, about 6 years ago, the board was asked to sign a sort of petition. I think that a lot of groups came together and they wanted to get key bodies to sign this statement against the development of public open space, because basically the government was pressurising local authorities to sell it off because they needed short-term gain. And I think the LI was asked to sign the document, but it refused to sign it. And I think, in a way, will the LI reconsider and start to? I
mean, I obviously can't raise a decision because I'm only one of the trustees, and it depends on the board membership to some extent. But we also need to be clear what the Landscape Institute's charitable objectives are, and work at the right levels to make that happen. So,
but it's the public benefit, isn't it? That's key.
I mean, of
to
course,
the LIs.
many public benefits with other green spaces as well. So it's not just in these cases in that sense. So I think we need to be quite careful with what we tackle. And I think the Institute, you know, through various ambassadors, whether it's president, vice president, or staff, and other landscape professionals, you know, making pressure on to government to protect green spaces more. So in general, But
I think as well, a lot of it is not just, it's not just the fact that they're selling it off, because I can't say exactly what this is because this is being recorded, but there are situations where local authorities will agree to not sell off, but to put a long-term lease to the Department of Education or, you know, other authorities, because they need that land. But where I think there needs to be some more creative thinking is exactly what Guy was talking about earlier. If you're going to do that, then you need to make sure that the ethos behind having that open space in the first place is still kept. So, okay, the school may not need to use it 24/7. So can the community please use it, you know, in the evenings, early mornings, at the weekends, school holidays? I think it's a bit like the Greenbelt argument, isn't it? There's no point just having dead Greenbelt.
We're talking about dual use, basically, and lots of authorities have been doing that.
Absolutely, to that extent. But also a lot of pieces of land have so many different ownerships and connections and so on. And often you can't make a bullet point which says do this because it's so complex. I have worked with lots of land management and it's a minefield. It's really, really difficult. So, And you've, I think, illustrated that a bit. You know,
the boss gets into some quite difficult negotiations. We work with lots of different landowners and developers, and where leases end up, and it can be so complex. Yeah. And even as we found with planning law, even if something's metropolitan open land or borough open land, which is supposed to be the maximum protection you can give an urban open space, these things are still being built on. They're still being given longer term leases. And the trouble is, it's kind of development by stealth, because they'll say, oh, we're putting a building on there, it's ancillary to the park use. Then the next thing you know, the local authority is changing the class use on that building from parks use to a school or something else. So.
Yeah, I've seen, also development sites in Cambridge where one developer built one development with a green space, another one the other side with a green space, until even today there's still a fence going through, and the local authority has not the opportunity to take the fence down, although it was all designed to be one space, green space for access. So from a legal point of view, it's a huge minefield. And, from the Landscape Institute point of view, to get involved in individual green space and how it all works is just not feasible.
No, I'm not talking about that. It's more of a policy statement.
No, I think in general, there's a general desire to create more green spaces and highlight ongoingly how important green spaces are, COVID has shown that, and I think the Institute has, written about it at the time and made, I think the wrote a whole paper to government to take the opportunity, to invest more and support more green spaces and so on. Yeah. But I think it's all of us, it's our professional background as such, where we're involved in communities as much as projects, to make the case, and also to, land is there in perpetuity to also ensure there's good management involved. I think what we heard earlier, that, landscapes should be managed by volunteers. I think it was a guy, you say, right, as such, that was just a pie in the sky, and they're trying to do that in Newcastle and all these sort of places. And it's just not possible, because you need to have quite, intense professional knowledge how to manage land. It's not just, chopping a hazel tree or doing some, leaf raking or whatever. It's, the whole...
I think if those volunteers are managed, so like London Wildlife Trust, for example, or Bankside Open Spaces Trust, I think that can work. And I think...
but you have the Wildlife Trust in the background.
You have
all
to.
The paperwork and all the administrative background and legal and all these sort of things. You couldn't do it necessarily without.
And I think in Newcastle, they've ditched their parks department, just created a trust, haven't they? But there was another reason for that, which was to create an opportunity for grant funding, which was local authorities.
Yeah, partially that, and also I think to make parks safer, I think, in the hand of the organisation. Anyway, a question over there. Yes.
Just actually really on that point is that if the community commits and they really work hard, and then they're left adrift without facilitators and expert advice and really good management, it is really disheartening. And not to be negative about this, but it's really important that if you're going to be participating as a member of the public, as a volunteer, that you must be treated properly. I think the point about giving trainees financial subsidy to do the work, to do that, I think it's really if in this situation where money and the economy is thrown in our faces all the time, how there's no money, and that kind of thing, support young people developing and older changes in career and all that. And really support people to make decisions about what they would like to do, what they'd like to learn, and how they could support things. I think we've got to be quite forceful about it.
Yeah, and I think it's really up to building also confidence in communities to step up and to do these things and get the right people together. And that's always a problem. I worked in Cambridge, and you had lots of people who had lots of amazing professional background, so that was not a problem. But if you go to other places, you might not have that, and it's really it was difficult. Yeah. Right at the end.
Yeah. Just one like just to bring a little bit of a kind of historical perspective on this. I think you answered about nothing being new. You mentioned, Carolin, the Open Spaces Society. We have their archive here at the Happens, and
I didn't know that.
They've been, just to give you some perspective on this, they began as a Commons Preservation Society to protect woodland and putty ponds that was developed in 1865. So nothing in these things about the public open spaces within those areas, none of this is new. There's a historical perspective on all of it, but there's often these issues are ones that we think we've just discovered them often, and we think that those are things that actually those organisations, they've done their parliamentary lobbying is their kind of bread and butter. But then we've also got the other kind of here, CPRE, who had a slightly different take on it. They founded in 1926, and they're coming up to 100 years old. So yeah, these are not issues that necessarily we've only just started debating or only been debating in these forums. But it's quite interesting when you take that, when you discover how long those things have been going on.
I think, and that's all these, I think, I've seen things being regurgitated and they just get different names, you know. I mean, I just find that always quite fascinating. I was thinking, you know, in 20 years' time, what will sustainability be called? Yeah. Or when I was a student, it was holistic, and then it became sustainability, and now it's climate change and biodiversity emergency and these sort of things. So I'm sure in 30 years we have another term. Any other question on this? But really interesting talk. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very cool.
Our final speaker, can I introduce Sarah Cooke from the Groundwork Trust in London. She's a landscape architect and works on regeneration projects, provides a range of landscape design services as part of the ethos of the Groundwork Trust in London. That it's based on end user involvement in all aspects of design process, and also the idea that one provides a sense of ownership with the aim that the end result will be something that the end users will love and care for. So
always the hope.
Always the hope. So please join me, Sarah Cooke. Here we go.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and for listening, and all of the other lovely presentations.
Sarah, speak up, please.
Speak up. Okay. So a little bit about Groundwork. Groundwork is an environmental and social not-for-profit organisation. We're part of a federation of trusts that operate across the UK. Groundwork works alongside local communities, public bodies, private companies, and other voluntary sector organisations to support communities in need. We help support individuals and communities to make changes in order to create better neighbourhoods, build skills and prospects, and live and work in a greener way. We've nearly 30 years of experience in delivering bespoke projects that use the environment as a catalyst for building a more sustainable future. Each year we deliver over 800 projects across London, helping to improve the quality of people's lives and places where they live, work and play. So what we do and why we do it. The foundation of our work is co-creation. Our projects are based on partnership working, collaboration and facilitating participatory processes. We recognise residents are experts of their own experience and their own environments. We raise aspirations, inspire, facilitate and provide resources to meet those aspirations, hopefully. We encourage sustainable change and a positive legacy. What is co-creation? So co-creation is a practice of stakeholder collaboration during the phases of a design process. Participants with different roles align and offer diverse insights, usually in facilitated workshops. Designers can therefore get more of a holistic view of what the community requires. Key considerations are clarity of roles and responsibilities, stakeholder analysis, community profile, budget always really important, maintenance first, parameters and shared understanding of the overall aims, engagement strategy integrated into the overall programme, where the whole community is targeted. We have a multi-staged and iterative process where we engage diverse communities with different tools and mechanisms. We collect the data from those engagement events and we put them into the design and we relay them back. So the benefits of co-creation are that we get a lot of local knowledge and intelligence about what the area is, how people use it, what problems are. We get better solutions based on community priorities, community ownership with the community and for the community. We make areas that are fit for purpose, have longevity,
and are sympathetic to the local context and the local need. And getting communities involved also strengthens funding links, which is really quite important. Co-benefits of this, we get some social cohesion, some skills development, improved community well-being, and new social connections. So, engagement dues. So, a robust and transparent process. So, making sure that everybody is involved, everybody that's affected by the change that could be happening. So we make sure that they're informed and involved from the beginning. So early involvement is really important. The sooner you get people involved, the better. You don't want a situation where residents think that decisions have already been made and we've brought a design to them, we haven't thought about them and don't care. So we need to make sure that they're brought in right at the very beginning and that they have their say right from the outset. So build on what works. If one form of engagement is working, stick with it, build on it. Think of different approaches for different groups, different communities. You need different engagement strategies for different people and different types of communities. So everybody's input is valid. Make sure everyone feels valued and listened to. Can't always implement someone's ideas. We get some very out there ideas, some very interesting ideas, and very off budget ideas. But what you need to do is listen. You need to let people know that if we can't implement their idea, why we can't, and if there's a way that we can do something similar or lead them towards something that's more appropriate, then that's what you do, and they've been listened to, and that's the important part. So that comes down also to managing expectations and having clear parameters. So managing expectations is important. There will be physical, time and budgetary constraints to every project, as well as considerations about maintenance, which is something I think we've all touched on as to how these landscapes are looked after in the long term. So we need to look at multiple ways to engage. And up here we've got a few examples of different quite active engagement strategies. We use, a lot of people aren't comfortable coming to on-site engagements, but they will be happy using an online portal. A lot of local authorities that we work with will have a sharing portal where they'll let the local community or the people, residents on the estate that we're working on, let them know what's going on, and there'll be notice boards around the estate. We'll work with the local authority client and also with TMOs and TRAs, and we'll get letter drops in, we'll get questionnaires in that can be mailed back. Often we're looking at communities where there's a lot of people who English isn't their first language, so you need to make sure that you've got communication on all levels. And the good thing about having pop-up engagement events is that you can catch people as they come to and fro from their homes, from shopping, from work, whatever, and also the children come out. So these events are great for children, and children are great for these events because the children will bring their parents along for the ride. They'll get excited and engaged. They have lots of fancy ideas, as children do. So that's great. And also, if the parents, if their first language isn't English, then often the children will be there to translate for them. So, you know, it brings communities together. Once you've got people out there, they're aligned with each other, you know, they can start agreeing that they don't want to bench near that someone's window, or, you know, that they need new bin stalls or what have you. So you start getting people on the estate that haven't talked to each other before actually communicating with each other. So also timely. So it's got to be timely, getting the process started early. So once a project's been identified, local authority has said they've got funding, there's some green space in this area, then you have to let people know right away and get the engagement process started early. And then once we've got the engagement process started, we can start taking ideas to people. We can show them we've listened to their ideas. We can feed back to them what they've told us. We can show them how we're changing the design in order to accommodate their particular needs. So all has to get started early, because there'll be also a time frame for funding to be spent and for the project to be on site and be built. So all of those constraints have to be considered, and everything has to be done in a very timely and organised manner. So I don't know if this is, it wasn't almost still there. So understand your audience and what is in it for them. So understanding the audience is important, getting to know them, getting to know about their estate, getting to know what their worries and concerns are. Do they have antisocial behaviour on the estate? They're worried about safety, lighting, who uses the space, will we need play items? Is it an area that's full of young children, young families? Or is it an older community that are more interested in accessibility and safety? And last but not least, make it meaningful and make it fun. So if you get people engaged, get them excited and interested, you'll get a much better result. So example of an engagement plan generally is that we'll have inception guided by a steering group. We'll have some stage 1 engagement to understand the local context and priorities. We'll have some design development, strategic design brief. It's based on the results of the engagement. We'll do a sketch design based on feedback from the engagement. We'll share and seek the feedback on the design back to the community. We'll share a final design once all the information we need is back in, and then we'll keep the community informed of what's happening and when it's happening, because everybody will say, well, when's it starting? When are you going to do it? So we need to make sure that throughout the whole process, we advise people when contractors will be on site, when different stages will be finished, and what sort of things are being done to keep them safe during construction, and when they can expect to use their new space. So that is pretty much co-creation. And this is just an example of a couple of things that we've done lately. So since I brought some notes from some of my colleagues, because I haven't worked on these projects particularly, but these are all part of the HS2 phase 3 mitigation. So obviously everyone knows about HS2 and all the mess and all the construction, etc., and how long it's been going on. So we've, throughout Camden, we've got a lot of areas that are really affected by this construction. So we've worked with a lot of communities, and this is a wellbeing garden located at the rear of Harrington House on the Regent's Park estate. The space was originally predominantly grass. It had a few hedges, a few rose bushes, and there was one resident that took care of the garden and was trying to establish a little wildlife area in one space. But that resident had some mental health issues, and she did not like speaking to anybody at all, and was quite hostile when we came. And this is, you get this quite a lot. You get quite a lot of hostility. Some people want change and they want things to be better. Some people just like to be left alone. They don't want any change. They don't want their space interrupted, and they can be quite hostile. So that's another fun element of doing consultation work, is that you have to really manage people quite well. But anyway, this lady gradually came out, reluctant to engage, talked to us through other members, other residents that she trusted. She came out and generally was eventually won over. So as you can see, we've underplanted the rose gardens, we've created accessible pathways and seating, and we've done a lot of really nice planting, and there's a little wildlife pond in one corner as well that's also now being looked after by one of the residents, and then monitoring the wildlife. So it's also, it's also an opportunity for learning, and I mean, it's great well-being. It's a great thing for everybody's well-being. But people start to monitor the wildlife. We did a lot of SUDS work, so sustainable drainage systems on the Queen Caroline estate, where there was a lot of tarmac, there was a lot of flooding, and we put in these sustainable drainage systems with some on-the-way play, as well as lots of wildlife planting. But the residents there loved the idea so much that they all got behind it, and they all learned about SUDs and what they are and what they do and why we have them. And, you know, so it's really a good educational tool as well. This is Thomas Square. It's also part of the HS2 improvement works. It's a very complex social space, lots of different people living around the edge and different businesses. This tree here is what that was. That was a space before, and that's that tree. So they've liberated it from that big concrete space and made a lovely deck and planting around it. There were lots of been bidding since 2018 on a lot of these works. So this went all through COVID as well. Through COVID, we had to develop different ways of communicating with people. So we had lots of online consultation. And then as things sort of opened up a bit, we did lots of outdoor consultation, and part of these projects, there were lots of walking tours. So it's very, you can show people a design in 2 dimensions, and you can do them a little 3D illustration, and you can tell them what it's meant to look like, but they don't understand spatially quite where their window looks out onto. Well, what's it going to mean for me? How's it going to change my aspect? So we do little walking tours and do little maps and diagrams to show people what's going where, you know, and what will be changed close to their space. So there's lots of different ways, and you have to get quite imaginative, and really, you know, that's the whole thing about knowing your audience, is you have to get to know people, go down there, find out what is really important to them. So, and I think in doing so, that's when good landscapes are created, and that's when landscapes for longevity are created, because people buy into them and people take care of them. I think that's me. As it's so just it quickly, I know, but it's the end of the day. So,
well, Sarah, thank you so much. So we have a little bit question and answer session now. Any sort of thoughts from people? Yes, at the end. Yeah.
I think managing people is really interesting. I'm trying to think, how much time do you guys spend in the project?
How much time do we spend on consultation, particularly? Sometimes quite a lot, and it varies. It varies from site to site. I've just finished one project I was working on in Brent has just got through planning. We've been working on it for 4 years. We've been doing consultation for 3 years. We've had multiple consultations. And yes, so you do, you know, it depends on the people. You know, that particular project, there was a lot of animosity because it was infill social housing on an existing council estate. So there were council tenants and leaseholders on an estate. They had a certain amount of green space, and we were going to be building on some of that green space and on some of the car parking areas, which they didn't want. We were bringing in new people to live on their estate, which they didn't want. So it's, you know, it's very difficult, it's very tricky. So a lot of the time, I think listening is key. Just listen, because some people just want to rant. Some people just want to be angry at you. And if that's what they need, then that's what you give them. You just listen. So.
And in time, you become very skilled to direct the conversation and these sort of things. So, not worry. Yes.
Do you sometimes feel that you're actually doing work that the developers should have provided?
I don't know. I mean, London's a very tight space, and it's evolved, you know, over time in such a higgledy-piggledy sort of way. And after the war, I think lots of social housing was put in, and lots of council estates and houses that were bombed were levelled, and you've got these big estates everywhere, and they're not necessarily connected well or thought out. So these are old. A lot of these places are quite old. They're not new developments necessarily.
Retrofit.
Well, HS2 is just an example.
Don't necessarily wouldn't have maybe the expertise, and actually bringing a landscape architect with that expertise is ideal, isn't it?
Yes, goodness knows what people do. They've got landscape architects.
But they're probably more involved in the whole technical.
Yeah, I mean it is, but I mean we deal with people at grassroots. We deal with communities. That's our specialty really. Is we deal with communities, and we make spaces that they want. We don't do lovely plush, bells and whistles, as much as we all would like to, as landscape architects, do those really great projects. But landscapes for people are so important, and what they want and what they need is most important.
Yes, it's a much more individual service to the people, the local community, than anything you'd get from a developer.
The community engagement part, do you find there's a particular method or tool that has been most successful?
I don't think there's any one thing that works better overall. I think on site, actually being there and speaking to people, so those are very important. I think it's really necessary to get on site and speak to people. But you have to do lots of different things, because as I said, there are people that won't want to leave their houses and speak to you. There are people who English is not their first language. There is also other situations, such as the big project I was just speaking about. There was a tenants management organisation, and the person who ran that was quite overbearing and was quite overbearing and really pushed their own agenda and didn't really want anybody else's opinion. They liked the green space lot. That was it. Other people wanted it open, but they were too scared to come and say. So if you can do something more anonymously and give them a leaflet that they can mail back in, then you'll get those opinions. And also if you can do on-site consultations at different times, different ways when those certain people aren't around, so it's, you've got to, that's why it's important to know the community, know the people that you're doing this landscape for, so that you can see all of the different, battles that are going on between people, because not everybody on one estate will want the same thing, and some people won't want anything. So, you have to balance it all out and make sure you get to hear everybody one way or the other.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
I was just going to add to that actually. Sorry. So in my experience, naming no schemes, naming no developers. Developers can be extraordinarily arrogant and clumsy when it comes to speaking to community, in my experience. And the other thing they tend to do, you talk about the vocal voices, they tend to listen to the most vocal voices. And the reason they do that is because depending on where they are in the planning system, they are frightened of getting any kind of backlash or objections when it comes to their plan going through. And the wonderful thing about a landscape architect who genuinely are very good at doing community consultations, in my experience, is that you act as a sort of a third party, and although you're on the payroll of the developer, they trust you more than they do the developer, because you're not seeking to defend your design, you're seeking to listen. So you asked about a tool. The most important thing is listening, as you said, and show that you're listening. Write things down, ask them questions. Don't try and defend your concept design. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's really important, and that is a really important point, because you know, as designers, you get very precious about what you're designing. You want to do something beautiful and you want to do something, we all want to leave our mark and make something wonderful in the world. But, you know, if somebody doesn't want it and it's not for them, you know, you have to do what they need. And that, I think, is good design. That's good design, is when you give people what they actually want and what they actually need. And also they'll think they want something and you'll think, well, no, that's not really a good idea. And you can talk to them and explain to them why it's not a good idea to have swimming pool on their estate or something. You know, but you can talk them round and then they'll understand, you know, why they can have something else and why it might be better. So.
Yeah. But what I was, in my career, I was just amazed is that some communities, they just want to keep things as they are. And they had not the imagination, or so they actually were allowed to have better landscapes.
Yeah.
They actually sort of almost self-box themselves in.
Yeah.
And for me, that was always really exciting to then actually showcase and bring image boards and look what you could have. And it's absolutely amazing. And you suddenly see them literally blossoming as a community.
Yeah.
It's really, really nice.
Well, it is. It's good. I mean, that one project I was just talking about, where we had these strong-minded TMO. Really.
Yeah.
They had all the green spaces locked up because it was easier for them, because they didn't want rough sleepers, and you know, it's a concern. But when we did, you didn't get to hear anybody's opinion really until we did an outside consultation just at the beginning of the opening up of COVID. You know, and you got families coming through with their kids on their bikes, and they suddenly said, oh, so we can have some bike sheds. Can we have some bike storage? Because I've got 3 children's bikes on my 5th floor balcony, you know, and it's just not great. So, and they were excited. And they were, oh, we can have that. That's part of this. Fantastic. So,
any other questions? Are there any other questions for any other speaker?
When you present back to the community, you know, your solutions to their needs, not everyone can read drawings. So do you do 3D series or?
We're not at the scale that we do 3D fly-throughs, although when we're working with architects, they'll do them, which is great. But we'll do 3D visualizations. We'll give precedent images. We'll do a good description. We'll do the plan. You know, and part of the consultation will be walking tours. So I know not everybody can read a plan. It's really difficult for anybody who doesn't generally draw plans to really understand them. So that's why you do the on-site engagement, and you can walk with somebody and say, this is where we're putting that tree, or that's where we think that seat could go. What do you think? You know, so that's why the interactive process is really important, because it does help explain something that is quite abstract.
Right. Oh, yes, Leah.
I was going to just ask, sort of, what's Groundwork's role in the aftercare of these spaces? Because I think, Guy, you mentioned about going back to a school that you sorted out 10 years ago and reimagining that. And I think in the past, when we've done work on estates, or when I worked at Bankside Open Spaces Trust, actually, you know, if you go back 10 years later, you've got a raised bed that's disintegrated, you've got all the plants not there anymore. So I just wondered what Groundwork's role was in ensuring or even evaluating that these new creations have been successful and are remaining in place as they're meant to be.
Right, so I don't think anyone can ensure, you know, the long-term health of a landscape and who's looking after it generally, but what you do is you design in for longevity wherever you can, you know, you design in robustness. The contractor who implements it will have their 12 months rectification period, so they'll be doing the maintenance for 12 months, and then it will be handed back over to the council. So I think we all know what that means.
Can't you hand it over with a management plan though?
So, oh yes, yes.
You hand it over with a management plan, and then the local authority or the community, because that's what people have done in the past.
Yeah, we do. We do a management plan, and it depends on individual communities. So the community where all the SUD schemes went in, those people all got educated on SUD schemes. They were really interested and really engaged and excited. And these are people that will look after their spaces for the long term, and they will let you know if something's going wrong, or, you know, if they need some kind of retrofit, or, you know, your drain's blocked up now, you need to, you know, it's overflowing. But that is the whole thing about co-creation, is it is much more likely that that space will be looked after long term. People come and go though, you know, people come and go on these estates, and you might have a really, and we've worked on a lot of NHS projects as well, where they'll have a community group who will come in and do gardening, but there again, people change, people move on, you know.
It's really tricky.
It is.
You get contractors mowing down tulips that have been planted by trees.
Yes.
You know, there's always stuff like that, and it's really difficult. So it's interesting to hear how.
Well, if you get, you know, big buy-in, people then care. People police their space better when they have, you know, some kind of engagement, ownership.
Yes. Informal ownership in that sense. Yeah.
You encourage them to police.
Not formally, but you know, when you create a more active space, you're creating a better policed space, because you've got passive, you know, overseeing. You know, so if you open up spaces that are dark and haven't been used before, if you make good routes through, if you make it accessible, more people that are in a space, using a space, that live around the space, the safer that space is. You know, if you get abandoned spaces that nobody wants to go in, you're going to have all your drug dealers sitting there swapping packages. But if you have people out there using it all the time, you know, you're not going to get that kind of activity. And it's something really important to think about when designing landscapes, is how it's going to be overlooked generally.
I think as well, the other thing is, if you're working with community groups, it's really helpful to go where the energy is. So just contradicting slightly, I found with the Edward Bankside project that I ran, where those raised beds failed, is where almost kind of like we're trying to squeeze something in that didn't quite fit. So if we hadn't got a community that was already set up there that really, really wanted to do it, they would fail quite quickly. But there's lots of those projects that continue to thrive 12 years later, because that community continues to grow. So you mentioned TMOs and TRAs. Actually, if you work with TMOs, so those who don't know, tenant managed organisation means that they have grant funding, so they can control the maintenance regime on their own estate, and you tend to have better success with them than, say, working with other resident associations that don't have the same grant. That's my experience anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Last question from the back. Oh, sorry. Yeah, if you go and then.
I have a general question
a bit louder.
I have a general question for anybody that's worked in industry for a long time. I think that I kind of entered this industry wanting to have a lot of compassion for contractors and people that
Wait till they've shouted at you at 8 o'clock in the morning where their money is.
Yeah. And I think you hear, you know, as like school grumblings from pretty much everybody that isn't a contractor about them. But I think that I have a real desire to not lean into that, I mean, I acknowledge that they need to come to the table too. I think what I hear a lot is that they don't want to, but I think kind of how have people had success about engaging with contractors or engaging with having people understand where we are coming from. I had a conversation with an architect the other day where their mind was blown up. Landscape is the cheapest part of a development project, which is crazy to me because obviously plants are going to be cheaper than granite shipped from China. But like, I think how do people maybe understand stuff like that a little bit more, like why it's valuable that we're doing the work that we're doing in the first place?
Not sure I understand. Is that a question about architects or contractors?
I guess maybe like the whole process.
Are you talking more about sustainability and using the best products as well? I mean, there seem to be lots of things wrapped up.
Yeah, how do you convince other people that you have to work with that we are valuable?
Oh, that is the question there, I think. That's
professionals, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
that's a big question, and that's where I think it's all professionals not very good at.
Just come to it. So we've got quite a lot of experience of setting up maintenance organisations, business parks for private developers, where what they're financed by simply pence per square feet on service charges. So what you have to do is just not undervalue what you're providing. And the other, if you budget for it right from the beginning, for maintenance and management, right from the beginning, you don't have a problem. The worst problem is to under budget for landscape. In terms of contractors, finding good contractors is quite challenging. Once you find them, hang on to them.
And there are passionate contractors out there.
There's a lot you can do with through the planning authorities in terms of Section 106 agreements, bonds, business. Central Park, New York, is a prime example where it's business interests who look out on Central Park, who are interested in the maintenance and therefore pay for the maintenance. Because ultimately, particularly in the States, it's just pence per square feet.
But we used to
We
used to deal with commuted sums though as well. So after a development's finished, you get the commuted sum from the developer that would come across.
It's also we have trusted contractors that we use, and we use them for these smaller projects. We have a list of contractors that we know, and we know the quality of their work, and we have a good working relationship with them.
Yeah, and also you know that they have, for example, good relationships with the communities they're working, so it's really important. But you find that all the time. Helen, can we make that the last question? Oh no, there's one more.
With regard to contracting, a lot of the skill is in how you write your contract documents.
Yes.
Yeah. And one of the things that we found to be very successful is to start by saying this is what we're trying to achieve in a few words, and then putting in a list of standards that are useful. You can actually say, well, yes, this is. It's a silly example, but there's quality standards that can be assessed. And I think policing and enforcement is something that also local authorities find incredibly difficult to do. It's a nebulous thing that unless you hand them on a plate, say, these are the standards you've got to meet, these are what we meant by this, and explain what your project's about, you've got a fighting chance that it will actually be delivered as you wanted it. But if you just give a contract document that says, we're on 6 class, you need to do this and you've got to do that, you shall do it and you shall do that. You're rubbish in, rubbish out, to be honest. But if you've got a good quality document that says, this is what we're trying to achieve, it's hard, it can achieve what.
Yeah, I mean, specifying quality plants, good sized plants, and also, like you say, doing a good maintenance document for the long term is really key, and being very specific, because you may know what you mean, someone else may not.
I have a point. Yes. Have good relations with contractors. You have to visit a great many times and get to know them on the site. And get their respect by knowing what they're doing and what's there.
Yeah,
it's a matter of
and that's something we do because we work with certain companies quite a lot, and they're smaller scale projects, and we rely on the good nature of the contractors that we use. We have a particular contractor that there's always a bet on as to how soon it will be before somebody's coming out with a cup of tea for him, because he builds such good relationships with the people that he works with.
But I think also as a young landscape architect, be confident in what you designed and what your specification says, and stand up to your contractor, because they try to bamboozle you with all sort of things. So be confident, but you get that in time. Don't worry.
Stay away from BE.
The young gentleman here.
Yeah, I was just going to ask another sort of slightly more general question. Obviously today we've kind of looked at some great sort of community gardens and community management projects, but in a way, it seems like landscape at the minute as a profession is very much focused. It's almost promoting the sort of big budget, very flashy kind of landscapes. It's kind of like, is the profession or is the industry almost championing these city redevelopments and large scale redevelopments almost too much and not doing enough to champion?
So I can tell you a lot of people have not done flashy schemes, so I'm one of these. I've worked mainly for the public sector or third sector, and also I think our landscape awards tackle smaller schemes and such to really recognise that. And yes, small schemes have equal value, sometimes even more value than big flashy schemes, in my view.
Depends who you're working for.
Yeah.
Depends who you're working for.
And money is not necessarily everything. You know, it's the product at the end, and whether it actually does a good service to people and nature in that sense. Yeah. Yeah. Right, shall we stop here? Because I can see some people drifting off. More cake later on. So if I maybe just quickly sum up, just a big thanks to our 5 speakers. Leah really started us on that sort of green spaces for everyone. And you really provided a really good insight into diversity, inclusion, and how you bring particularly the younger people on board and newcomers into the sphere, which I found actually really fascinating. We've talked about, you know, what how nature can nurture in a way, and how you bring people into that whole affair. I think all of you talked really about how to bring people together and to own the sites you either develop or manage afterwards. We talked a lot about, I think with Guy, about the natural adventure playground and how that can really be achieved within, particularly in schools environments, and really trying to make a sort of success with these sort of spaces, and really the results of bringing children into the sort of more natural sort of environment. And you also talked a little bit about the forest schools, and what I really loved is your phrase about that the way you design is like a classic medieval village design, because it works really well with all the alleys and tunnels and niches and so on, and we can really see that children get to that. You also highlighted a little bit that the National Lottery talks a lot about landscapes, parks and nature, but are totally unrealistic perhaps, and that people might manage them on a voluntary sort of basis. So Jan, you took us through an incredible journey of Robert Marnock as a early landscape designer, as probably the most successful one even in the 19th century, with all the different places he's been and grew up. And I really loved that, you know, what he has been involved with in his time are really sort of landscapes actually really recognized today as quite eminent and important landscapes, and probably made some quite significant changes in the way we design cities, and perhaps even as a forerunner to the garden city movement to some extent. So really, I think really fascinating. Helen, you took us into a world
sex work.
I think into a world of, I can only say of piled up bones and things around. I find it really fascinating, because I think we don't really talk enough about what happens afterwards if we're not here anymore, and there's still sort of cultural issues. And you sort of also highlighted different cultures have different association with it. And also how the material culture of objects really are part of the whole story of recreating a space valuable for people, and really that these are also symbols as a source of power. So really, really interesting insight into a really fascinating place, and also how some of the poorest in our society have not been treated well. And that is still felt today. And I think that's something we should never sort of forget. And then Sarah, you really talked a lot about changes for better neighborhoods, building up skills and job prospects, and creating more better places for people to live and work in a sort of greener way. And I think you really highlighted how important it is to do good engagement with people who might not actually have the right terminology or voice, different languages and so on. And what I was most impressed, well, not most, but also impressed with was that you also educated about sustainable, what do you call it, drainage systems. I thought that was a notch up. I haven't heard that one before. And I think what you also said is good landscape create longevity and need buy-in, and the whole spiel how you actually make things last. And then we had loads of fantastic questions. I really loved that. They came from all directions and all different ways. And I think one of our junior members, the compassion for contractors, I was like, wow. But I think we probably could sum up the whole day. I think it's really more the compassion and passion to really serve our communities well by creating really lovely landscapes in different ways. So can I just ask you to raise the hand and clap for lots of